In the near future, in the vicinity of the Golden Coast of Australia, after a fierce battle, the man held his battle-wounded girlfriend in his arms, looked at her, and listened to her last request to him. But he immediately shouted at her to endure a little longer, because he was sure that help would arrive soon. But she realized that she would not wait for him to take her teleportation skill before it was too late. Looking at her calmly, I asked her what she meant by the word take away. She smiled and said that she knew all about his ability. He stopped her, turned his head to the side, and asked her not to continue talking about it. The girl asked him once again to take away her teleportation skills and survive. When he looked at her, his eyes were filled with sadness, and his lips barely parted to say the word, "I'm sorry." A light energy began to emerge from his body and surrounded him completely, but it brought more and more pain with each passing second. As the pain became unbearable, he screamed, and dark energy appeared on top of the light force. When the energy began to disappear, the girl's power of teleportation was already in his possession. Her last words did not leave his head, as she knew that he knew how to use the ability-absorbing skill. And then when she said that she knew he was able to absorb other people's abilities, he stopped her. As soon as he got to his feet, he turned around to face the desert because he could no longer look at it because of his sadness. I had to fulfill her last will because she asked that at least he, the leader of the Sanwu group, survive. In an instant, his body disappeared into thin air. He was the only one who managed to escape that day. The beginning of all these events was the appearance of many portals high in the sky over all the cities of the world. From these holes, a large number of demonic beasts and monsters from an unknown dimension descended on the world. As a result, millions of people around the world have been injured, or worse, have lost their lives. Those who remained were separated from their families and became refugees. Powerful countries tried to suppress the situation with their strong military forces using ground equipment, and then they used jet planes to bomb cities to destroy monsters. As it turned out later, people were helpless against the monsters. They were chasing them, and then people were forced to avoid them or hide from them because hunger and horror reigned everywhere, and it all felt like the end of the world. However, when 3 years passed after the cataclysm, the first superhumans appeared. They were capable of destroying monsters that even powerful countries could not cope with using their armed forces. Their number was gradually increasing. It was the beginning of a counterattack by people. The superhumans joined forces and created a safe zone and called it the city, so the people who lived in the city could enjoy life again, just like before the monsters appeared. But on the other side, there were still dangerous areas called wilderness. People in the wilderness lived under the violence of anarchy and continued to live under the fear of death. The world was divided into safe and dangerous zones. At the present time, somewhere on the outskirts of Seoul in the wilderness, a group of people was moving towards an abandoned place. The head of the group shouted to the guide to see if they had arrived at the specified location yet. He also asked if it was true that he was not a superhuman, but an ordinary guide, and asked his name. After removing the mask from his face, he replied that he was just an ordinary person and his name was Kim Seong-woo. He immediately asked them to look up at the top where the cocoons were above them, which meant that they had entered the domain of copper spiders, and to listen to him carefully. The 19th grade copper spider is a relatively easy target to hunt. First, you need to cut off the legs, then the head, and collect all that is left of it. If possible, it is best to start with the 2 front legs, as this is their most important attacking part. You also need to be especially careful of the white webs that fly out of its mouth when it attacks. This is a dangerous attack that can instantly take off the head if not seen, and the head shouted at the man to stop acting like a tough guy and scaring them. Sanwoo accepted this remark, considering that they had defeated a level 18 bearded salamander, and apologized for the disrespect. While they were talking, the 6 red eyes of a copper spider were watching them closely. The spider had no intention of hesitating, so he attacked, and Sanwa ducked in time to notice the attack. By knocking over the group commander, he was able to save them from a spider web that passed a few centimeters away. In order not to behave like fools, he shouted for everyone to immediately move away and get ready. The spider was not small and shouted at them to take their places. He held his head up, sweat appeared on his face, and in a shaky voice he barely managed to say that this was not the 19th grade anymore. The monster in front of them sharply shone a pouch at the bottom of its head and began to move. Sanwoo knew what was coming next and shouted to them not to stand still and dodge. The web broke free from the mouth and flew at the man standing in front of the monster very quickly. When the head fell to the ground, Sanwoo shouted at them not to continue standing, but he realized that something was wrong with the level of skill of the squad. Before starting, the girl said that this was an 18th grade squad. All he had to do was guide them, and then he could make a lot of money. Even now he realized that it was a lie, because according to her, They were also a trained unit, not just a strong one. The spider growled at them and pointed one of its front legs forward to attack. Sanwoo noticed and shouted at the chairman to come to his senses, and the chairman stopped the attack with his sword. To increase the pressure, the monster connected a second paw, and although it was difficult, he managed to hold on. But he had to think of something, so he activated the ability to swing his fist and hit the spider. A yellow electric discharge enveloped the monster's body instantly. Sanwa was pleased that he had the ability to electrify and that it was true that there were superhumans among the squad. This attack knocked the monster down. He fell and did not move, and you could see the current passing through his body. The chairman pointed his sword and shouted to the men to attack the creature while they had the chance. The squad immediately grabbed their weapons and approached the creature, beginning to pierce the body with spears and swords. They surrounded the spider head-on, and he put his sword to the creature's head. Eunwoo, who was watching them, shouted that they were fools and should have started with their feet, not their head and body. As soon as the effect of the current ceased, the spider rose up and knocked everyone off their feet with quick sideways movement. One of them was thrown back so that he flew into a rock behind them, from which the rebar was visible. The chairman was embarrassed to have lost 2 people already, and the veins in his face were so thick with anger that he was crying. As soon as his emotions reached the upper limit, he grabbed his sword and ran to attack. When he found himself in front of the spider's face, he swung and sent a powerful blow at the monster. But with one paw alone, the monster managed to restrain the blow and stop the attack. And because he lost his vigilance, the second paw was able to punch him from behind. Since the situation was already catastrophic, he grabbed the sharp end with both hands. Then he activated the ability that enveloped both the spider and himself. To get rid of this pain, the monster reacted quickly and threw the man off its paw as far as possible. My head was thrown back to Sunwoo, who was standing behind me and watching what was happening. I turned my head back and saw that he was not moving, which meant only one thing. That now it was his turn to fight the monster that had destroyed the entire team. The attacking squad was full of newcomers who all died, and the question was why it happened. After all, his task was to be an ordinary guide, not someone who destroys monsters. Meanwhile, there was a stadium in the desert that was the exchange center of the 17th zone. On the phone, the man was told that Beatrice needed help, so he decided to send someone there. After the conversation, Kim Busik, the branch manager of Noda Zone 17, sat thinking about what to do. Meanwhile, his secretary Jamie watched herself in the mirror, admiring her skin. Suddenly, Kim Busik shouted at her, and she was so frightened that she almost dropped the mirror. He came in and asked her to tell Hunter Chang-soo's team to come to the exchange office. Jamie asked if this was about the barrier again, and he said yes, and he wondered what Beatrice was thinking about that this was happening so often. She looked at him and asked what he meant, and Kim Busik asked her to ignore his thoughts in her head. And since I came in and asked what else Sanwoo was doing, she said that he was accompanying a team of copper spider hunters. He felt strange because those creatures are weak, so they should have returned long ago. But he had no doubts about him, so he didn't have to worry, and asked her to tell him to get ready as soon as she returned. Meanwhile, Sanwoo saw the pouch under the monster's face light up again and move. There was no running away, as I had to fight back with my right hand, reaching into my inside pocket. He mumbled that he was only supposed to accompany them, not fight, and pulled out a gun. At this point, the spider released its web on him, but this time it was even bigger. But since he knew that he could not stand still, he easily managed to jump to the side. After he stopped, he pointed the weapon in the direction of the monster, pulled the trigger, and a shot rang out. The head of the squad woke up and laughed at his actions, because he thought that these bullets would do nothing to such a monster. Sanwoo asked him in a serious tone to get out of the way and just watch what would happen next. The bullets reached the target, shone brightly, and then a powerful explosion occurred. The spider was bleeding from 2 legs and had difficulty standing on one side. The chairman immediately changed his mind and realized that they were balls with cores, but asked why he hadn't used them from the very beginning, as soon as they started losing. Turning to him, Sanwoo asked him irritably if he had a conscience, because if they hadn't lied about their rank, this would not have happened. And now we have to waste precious cores for garbage like him. I called him a fake metahuman and shouted at him to watch him closely, because even an ordinary man with the right uniform and experience can defeat the 19th rank. Prepared, he grabbed the dagger and rushed to attack the monster. He knew exactly what to do because he had been a guide himself on hundreds of outings, so he had plenty of experience. As soon as the blade touched the spider's body, it began to growl miserably. Although the monster tried to move, it could not stop, and it was necessary to break all the paws. When he did, he shouted to the head that they had to listen to him because he explained that the paws were the first thing to go. And when the monster is already lying down and not moving, only then can we aim for the head. He raised the dagger above his head and took aim, shouting as he directed the blow downward. After the red eyes closed, it became very quiet and calm around me. Exhaling a sigh of relief, he told the head of the squad that he was trembling before a beast that could hardly be called big. Being a typical beginner until the very end, it turned out that the rank they indicated in the exchange office was not real. He also knew that a salamander of the 18th rank sheds its skin once a year, so he guessed that he had brought its skin and pretended to have defeated it. But I had to admit that their team was pretty brave for liars. No one escaped when the rest of them were being killed. Even when I saw that his stomach was pierced, I was really surprised that he grabbed the spider by the front paw and struck back. But instead of forging a paper about the rank, it was worth spending time on training skill. I was sure that he had reasons to do so, but it was not his business, and asked him if he knew what price he had to pay for lying to Nod. The only pity was that he had no right to destroy him right there, and he really wanted to blow his head off because of it. Suddenly, a voice from nowhere told him to destroy it and take something from it. When the head disappeared, I looked around but saw no one. The chairman smiled and said in a hoarse voice that it would be hard to wait for the execution at the hands of Nod. After these words, the head took his last breath. His eyes closed, and his head fell unconscious on his side. Asamva was more concerned about the voice that ordered him to kill him and thought that he might have just heard it. He lowered his head and repeated Jamie's words that his task was only to accompany the squad. When he got back, he forced open the door and shouted at Jamie how dare she send him with them. She stood up and asked me to calm down because there was no need to get so worked up. Her words made me even angrier because she didn't know how much she was directing him into a dangerous exit, and they couldn't tell what that skin was like. Jamie asked him to calm down once again. They had fooled them all. Not just him. To settle the matter, I shouted that this time she would not be paid and that from that moment on, I had to provide all the information about the client. Because he was holding it from her cheek, she muttered as she should have, because according to Nod's rules, it is not legal. While they were still arguing and quarreling, 2 more people came into the room. Sanwoo rudely said that if it were not for the branch manager, he would have cut all ties with the 17th zone long ago. Jamie added that the local people react quite violently to guides walking through their territory. He was angry that the goal of people is to have a plug in every barrel. And if you are destined to die, what difference does it make whether you are a monster or a hunter? Still, it was not pleasant that he had no abilities like those liars. Suddenly, a strong punch hit him in the face and sent him into the wall on the backside. Then a hand grabbed him by the throat and lifted him up, pushing him against the wall. The guy smiled as he finally came to the target of the man after his own heart. Now it was a question of whether to destroy him if he wanted to. I noticed that he had a very impudent look on his face at a person who could not help it. They said that everyone associated with Nod was a representative of the guild and could use its name if necessary. Any actions aimed at harming a member of the node will be considered as an attack on the node itself. The girl who was with him was a metahuman with enhanced vision, a hunter named Park In-jong. After the end of the world, Nod was the only guild that continued to fight for the preservation of peace. In the lands called the desert, they created safe places. She asked her friend if he was sure that he would not be punished for attacking an ordinary person as a meta person. The boy himself was a metahuman with enhanced physical abilities of the 17th level hunter Kim Seong-hoo. The arm immediately opened and Sanwoo fell down to the floor. Park In-jong came over and asked him if he was okay, and he said yes, and there was nothing to worry about. She didn't understand the point of behaving like that and making this scene. Another man who had been watching from the corridor for some time came into the room and asked if they were done. It was the leader of the 17th zone team of the Marlin Hunter team, Jung Chang-soo. From his appearance, Sanwoo already realized that something could happen if the whole team gathered. In his office, Jung Chang-soo said that they had received a request from Gwangmuan City to protect the barrier. Sanwoo immediately asked that such an abrupt task could mean that she had lost consciousness again, and it was indeed so. So until the barrier is restored, they were asked to play the role of bait for the monster. Kim Seong-hoo has never participated in such a task, but he has heard many stories about such requests recently. Jung Chang-soo could only guess that it was like Beatrice was exhausting herself, and he had heard rumors that she hadn't even been able to sleep lately. Kim Seong-hoo took the floor again, asking them to defend themselves in an indignant voice. Kim Busik told him that they are desperate, if we can judge by the current condition, because they promised citizenship in the city as a reward for the task. Such a reward immediately calmed me down, because it was better than a payment. The leader noted that this meant that they were really in a hopeless situation if they offered citizenship. Sanwoo gladly agreed to this task, and the group leader did not mind. Park In-jong also raised her hand and said that she was also willing to go for the chance to see the famous city. Smiling, Kim Sung-hoo raised his hand too, because if it was for citizenship, he was in. Jung Chang-soo stood up and ordered the Marlin team to prepare for the mission and meet tomorrow at 6 in the evening at the southwest gate. In the evening, in my room, I wrote down some notes in a notebook and thought that this city was one of the biggest after the end of the world. A huge energy barrier has been created on the border to stop all demonic beasts from invading the city. The previously mentioned energy barrier has been maintained by the forces of a high-ranking thinker named Beatrice in recent decades. But health problems also affect the barrier, and the problem was to do her job before she fully recovered her health. But if an S-rank beast attacks at this time, even if most of the townspeople are human, it will be an instant loss. The city decided to change its strategy after similar tragedies they had experienced. They decided to ask for help from the people of the desert to save the lives of citizens. The next day, they gathered at the designated place, and the commander asked Manhwa if they would go like that time, but he said no, because the terrain had changed. Because I heard that a 5th-ranked beast called the Bearded Gargoyle appeared in this zone. Sanvu understood that they were meta people, but still had to choose the safest route. Taking out a map, he drew that they had to go there, and the only danger there was the 15th-ranked deer beetle. Jung Chang-soo liked the route because he could handle them easily. They had been walking through the desert for a long time, and suddenly Sanwoo looked up in front of him and waved for everyone to stop. Kim Sung-hoo asked him what happened and why they stopped. He turned to him, put his finger on him, and asked him to be quiet. I got down on one knee because there was a trace and I needed to examine it well. The hunter Injun came closer and asked if it was a trail of a demonic beast. Sanwoo did not answer, but he had one request for her. Could she check the area with her eyesight? It was no problem for her. She activated her eyes and they shone with a pink glow. Sanwoo showed her to look in the direction of the largest sand clouds. She looked over there, but she couldn't see anything even beyond them. Sonyu could no longer wait. He asked them what was going on and why they were still standing. In order not to make them nervous, he said that most likely they were facing a horde of hoblings, and added that they had passed here about 15 minutes ago. Despite the fact that the horde was moving in the other direction, I am sure they heard them. Injun, who was looking ahead all the time, shouted that he was right, and a horde appeared and moved toward them. The commander praised him because he was sure he could trust their guide. Sanwoo assessed the strength of the team, and suggested that they should limit their path since half of them were not capable of fighting in close combat. The commander asked if there was anything nearby that he could use. He also asked Hunter Shanghu to carry Hunter Injong since they would be running all the way. The team abruptly took off and rushed into the cloud of sand in front of them. Sonya was angry that some guide was in charge of them and didn't think he could do it at all. Injun was smiling behind me because their guide looked cool when he was in charge and asked me to run faster. Although they were running quite fast, the silhouettes of monsters were already beginning to appear behind them. Hoblings were monsters of the 18th rank, one hobbling weaker than a copper spider. But there are a lot of them, so the horde has such a rank, even the goal is not easy for people in a battle in the open. Assessing the current composition of the team, 2 hunters of the 17th rank account for 1 with close combat skills. There was also a leader with the 10th rank, although it was still risky to engage in combat, but the chances were not bad. The bridge in front of them is 4 meters wide and 7 meters long if the team leader and Sonhu repel the attack in the middle of the bridge. So in theory, they didn't even have a chance of winning. Only 2 variables were confused. As soon as we got to the middle of the bridge, we stopped to listen to the plan further. Sanwoo said that the team leader and Sonhu would repel the monster's attacks in the center of the bridge. Meanwhile, the leader agreed to his plan to provide support from the rear. Enjoy asked what she should do because his plan did not mention her name. It was the first variable during the battle. Now it becomes just a ballast that needs to be protected. But her protection will distract the group's combat units from the battle. So in order to stop being an obstacle, it is better not to interfere in the battle. Of course, he was only thinking about it and did not tell her that, so he simply asked her to stand behind him. He took out the dagger and looked at everything from the outside and thought about the second variable. For example, the leader Jung Chang-soo is known even outside the 17th zone and has worked with him many times, but this is the first time he will see him in action with his own eyes. And Hunter Kim Sung-hoo and Hunter Park In-jong have only recently joined the team, and he doesn't know their skills either. So it was hard to relax when they were being attacked by a horde, and these variables were in their mind. As soon as the hordes approached, Chong Chang-soo activated his powers and swung his axe to stop the attack. Then he jumped into the air, swung his weapon, and rushed into battle to destroy the monster. Kim Sung-hoo also tried to keep up and used his amplification abilities to crush one by one. Having destroyed one, he decided to try a massive attack, hitting 2 with his sword. he immediately pushed the rest of the men who were preparing to fight, some of whom were killed and some were knocked down. Sanwoo was so impressed by the battle and their skills that he thought he had been worrying about the second variable for nothing. Although they were still far from complete victory, the two of them managed to stop the horde. Because they were so engrossed in the battle, they did not even see that danger was approaching them from behind. One monster grabbed Injin by the hair and pulled her down. Sonyu heard the scream and turned around to ask what happened, but Sanwoo shouted at him not to be distracted. He recognized that the guide was right, but he couldn't just listen to him as he continued to lead him right and left. The hobbling had already swung his axe over Injin's head and was about to strike her. Sanwoo picked her up in time so that the blow missed her only by hitting her hair. Due to the strong jump, they rolled aside to the edge of the bridge. Sanwoo realized that he could not count on outside help, so he had to deal with the monster himself. The dagger strike was ineffective as he quickly dodged on his butt. Immediately pointing the dagger in the other direction, he managed to knock the helmet off the monster's head. This enraged the hobbling, and he grabbed the axe sharply and directed a blow at his opponent. Sanwoo, although he did not expect such a turn, also managed to dodge with a jerk backward. But the speed of the hobbling was not small, and before he could get to his feet, he was already behind. Injong hurried over and stabbed her in the back, saving Xianwu. It also allowed him to attack and destroy the monster while he was distracted by it. Just at that moment, the rest of the team ran up and argued with all the attackers. Sung-Hoo immediately attacked with claims that what happened here was because he was supposed to protect Injong, not her. But she stood up for him, accusing him of being to blame because he missed one of them and he walked in behind them. This scenario did not suit him because he did not know that someone would attack from behind and tried to help until the guide ordered him to fight. The commander hurried to stop him because Sanwoo had done the right thing by telling him to focus on the battle, as it would have been difficult for him to hold the defense. I turned to Sanwoo and saw that he was sitting on his knees with his nose down and asked him how he was feeling. Although he said he was fine, he thought the opposite, that he had failed not only to protect the hunter Injin Ali, but also to make him help him. The commander said that they should leave the place as the noise of the battle could be heard by other monsters. But Sanwoo reassured me that there are many low-ranking beasts here, which means that there is no one stronger than these. They went on through the desert, and their journey went well because there was no one else on the road. Sanwoo stopped and began to look around him. Sunwoo shouted at him from behind, asking why they were there and if they hadn't already come. But he did not answer him a word, and silently jumped up on the wall to the side of them. He turned around and told them to come up to him, ignoring the hunter Sunwoo's question. As soon as they got out, they looked at the front and were surprised because the picture in front was impressive. Sanwoo turned to his comrades and said that they were looking at the dome of Gwangmun. As soon as we approached the defense, it was even more incredible as it was set from a distance. Injong came closer and gently touched him with her hand out of curiosity. And when she did, Sunwoo abruptly grabbed her and screamed in fright. And she screamed herself. She was embarrassed and then yelled at him that his jokes had given her a heart attack. The commander asked her how she felt nothing, and Injin replied that it was strange. For the sake of curiosity, Sunwoo also went over and stuck his hand inside and shook it. I asked my mentor if this barrier really holds back the demonic beast, and he replied that it has for 10 years. Once inside, they headed for the gate where the city guards were waiting for them. The man ordered them to stop in a harsh voice and show their identification document. Showing his ID, he introduced himself to him as the leader of the Marlin team from Zone 17, Zhang Changsu. The guard took his ID card, took a scanner out of his pocket, and checked the document for authenticity. After checking, he gave everyone bracelets and told them to put them on. Injan put it on, and when she looked at it, she noticed that it looked like there was a core where the pebble had been. The guard said that the barrier would be disconnected tomorrow at 7 in the morning, and they would be provided with a temporary place to sleep after sunset and would not be allowed to leave their rooms. Sunwoo asked the guard what would happen if they didn't listen and left the room anyway. With a serious tone, he replied that in that case, they would lose their arm because the bracelet would explode and it would also go off if they tried to remove it by force. This answer made the two of them quite nervous because they carry a bomb on their arm. Sunwoo went inside and thought that if it was for the purpose of preventing the beasts from breaking through, the barrier would be enough. But all these measures are against the people of the desert. As soon as we got there, everyone was impressed by the environment. The commander asked them again if it was their first time in the city. So if this is true, I said, welcome to a place where everything is intact. Injan was amazed that they had only walked a few meters, but it felt like they were in a completely different world. The commander turned to Sunwoo and asked him what he was going to do, whether he was going to the city or going to the room. He said that he was not going to the room yet, but wanted to walk around a bit and find the right store. Walking around the city, It was hard to believe that it was as peaceful as it was before the disaster. Stopping in front of one store, I read its name and headed inside. As soon as he opened the door, a girl with boxes jumped out in front of him. Sanwoo noticed that something had fallen out of her pocket and bent down to pick it up and give it to him. But when I went up, I saw that she was not there and had run off somewhere. After telling the seller everything he needed, he brought everything in a box in a few minutes. Curious? The man asked why he needed so many masks and similar things, and also asked how he would pay for them, since they only accept coins. While the seller was asking him this, he noticed something on the counter that looked like a grenade. But not to look like a fool, I asked the seller what it was. He said that he called it a magic bomb. If you pull out the check, it will explode like a stun grenade. It was strange, and Sanwoo even asked if it was already allowed to sell weapons to the townspeople. But the seller explained that it was not a dangerous thing, so it was not a weapon, but if it exploded nearby, he would be blinded for a while. Sanwoo also asked where it was used, but the seller did not answer clearly because it depended on who was using it. Their conversation was interrupted by the same girl who had recently run out of the store with a sudden appearance. Out of breath from running so fast, she asked if the owner had seen her entry card. Sanwoo immediately reached into his pocket and pulled out a map, showed it to her, and asked if she was looking for this. The girl was glad to find it, as she thought she had already sifted through it somewhere. The girl introduced herself as a senior researcher from Marie's Research and Development Department. Judging by his clothes, I asked him if he was from the desert and if he was a human being. I could offer him help, but he said he was not a human being. Marie didn't understand what he meant and grabbed his hand to make sure. She tried to determine what type of abilities he had, and did not even hear him tell her that he was not a meta person. Until I forcibly pulled my hand away from her to stop her from saying these stupid things. Marie shook herself and apologized because she was so interested in him. Still, she was surprised because she felt a signal that said she was facing a human being. Although she does not feel any abilities, it was strange for her. She mumbled something else, bowed, looked at her phone, and said she had to run. Lying in bed in my room, it was strange that she said he was a meta person. More than anything, he wanted to become a meta-human, and he searched for signs of awakening and methods of becoming one, but he was not destined to be one. So I had to accept the reality and decided to devote all of myself to working as a guide. And that's when someone said that he became what he dreamed of. He closed his eyes to sleep, feeling uneasy about it, and tried to reassure himself that the girl who saw him for the first time might know about him. The next morning, all the participants gathered between the walls and the barrier. The loudspeaker announced that there were 10 seconds left before the mission started and the countdown began. When the barrier disappeared, the hunters began to run ahead in search of monsters. The first hunters encountered were huge hornets that could lift a man. Jung Chang-soo shouted to the team to run forward and not look back. Then Sanwoo looked at him and shouted that they needed to move in that direction. They ran away while the rest of us fought the flying monster. Some people ran back screaming because they didn't care about citizenship anymore. They just wanted to live. The guards quickly blocked the passage, preventing anyone from getting back in. And because of their cowardice, the guards killed both deserters on the spot. Injeon shouted to see if anyone else had seen what had just happened, but the commander ordered them not to look back. Sanwoo understood the meaning of this task perfectly well. It was not a battle because there were many good hunters in the city, but that they were just bait to distract the monster. And with so many dangerous enemies, it made no sense to engage in combat. Injeon activated her ability just in case and immediately noticed a herd of beasts in the northwest. Hearing this, Sanwoo shouted out to stop moving. According to all the evidence and circumstances, it is most likely that the raptor groups of the 9th level should be ahead. One raptor is rated as the 9th rank. Even so, it can leave no living place from the horde of hoblings, so they will not achieve anything if they enter the battle. Injeon put her hand to her mouth in fright and asked what they should do now. He took out a mask with an air tube from his briefcase and handed it to the team to take. He put them on and said that they would hide in this swamp by lying down completely in the water. Although it was not very pleasant, they had no choice but to survive. Sanwoo knew that trained people from the city would be able to deal with the raptors, but mercenaries would not. As soon as the waves subsided from the passage of the raptors, and after waiting for enough time, Sanwoo got out of the water to take a look at the situation. After making sure that there was no more danger, I shouted to the others that they could get up. Sonhu asked if they had passed, and he said yes, but all the hunters who encountered them did not survive. And now they had to follow in their footsteps. They are aggressive so that there will be no other animals on their way. As darkness approached, they lit a fire in one of the abandoned houses and decided to rest. Sonhu asked when it would finally be over and they could return, but the commander didn't know Because last time it took several hours, so this time it would be no less. They could only wait for the signal. Suddenly, Sanwoo felt something like an electric shock through his body. He stood up abruptly, looking around without saying a word, which startled the team. The commander asked if he had seen anything, but Sanwoo said no, and that it was somehow suspicious. Jang Chang-soo asked what exactly was suspicious, and he heard that everything was very calm around. Sanwoo stood his ground and asked them to wait a bit, ready to fight. And then, looking into the void, he felt that something was there and seemed to be approaching them. And with the sound, they felt like they were also being watched from the darkness, and an inexplicable fear began to appear. In the darkness, two purple eyes appeared, coming closer and closer. When the commander saw this, he ordered Sunwoo and Injong to quickly move back, hiding behind them. As soon as the creature completely emerged from the darkness, shock and surprise appeared on his face. Since they were facing a demonic beast that was impossible for them to defeat, it was a black mantis. Jang Chang-soo immediately took note of his guide's reaction and asked why he was so surprised. But Sanwoo himself was not sure about the details, but he knew of a flying beast that looked like him, 2 meters high and 4 meters long. This is all the information he had, and he did not know the weaknesses and ways to destroy this creature. Because there was no data about it, in his opinion, they needed to retreat. The commander followed up by asking if they would be able to find out more if they joined him in battle. Sanwoo didn't like this idea because even without knowing his rank, it didn't mean that the mantis was weak because he had entered the territory of the raptor, which could mean that the predator in front of them was stronger than them, so the rank of the creature in front of them was at least 9th. Suddenly, the mantis opened its wings and leaped upward, finding itself directly above the team. The commander shouted for everyone to be careful, to take up combat positions, and not to allow an attack from the back. Sonu shouted that it was too dark to see where the creature was coming from. To get rid of this problem, Sanwoo asked the hunter Injin to track him down with his ability. She understood everything, activated her ability, and began to peer into the darkness that enveloped them. Even looking around the area, she could not find a black mantis. They stood in each sector waiting to be attacked. The team then heard the sound of approaching Sanwoo and decided to use this opportunity to track and find the monster. If everyone stays calm and reacts in time, everything will work out. And while he was thinking about it, he didn't even see the creature on his backside. Thanks to his experience, he was able to sense the danger in time and defend himself with a dagger. But the monster's blow was so strong that he was thrown back quite a bit. Injan turned around and shouted to him, asking if he was okay. And I noticed that the creature that had just been at the other end had already moved right over him. Looking up, he saw the monster already preparing to attack him. Jang Chang-soo could not allow anything to happen to his guide and rushed to his aid. The commander managed to run up in time to block the axe's blow to the mantis's front leg. I shouted at Sunup to get out of here and left him to it. As soon as he ran away, the commander pushed the creature's paws in front of him with force. After joining the team, he said that the situation was not in their favor because of the darkness, and Sonhu was angry because he wished there was at least a little light. Then Sanwoo remembered that he had bought something and reached into his back pocket looking for it. I shouted to the commander to grab the layer that gave at least a little light. Jang Chang-soo saw that the creature was above him and did not like that it was looking down on him, so he shouted at it to come down to him. When the light appeared, Sonhu Alo rushed into battle to help the captain, but he shouted loudly for him to stop and not do anything stupid. As soon as he stopped, he said that this bastard was only in front of him, so he asked him not to get involved in the fight. Sanwoo assessed these actions as correct, because if they were waving their weapons at each other, they would only limit their movements to avoid hitting each other. However, the leader had problems even with the raptors, and the black mantis is probably much stronger than them. To make matters worse, it wasn't just a matter of strength. He was smart enough to distract his victim to hide his position. It was a matter of how to defeat him. Jang Chang-soo, who was waiting for the monster to attack, unleashed his power and surrounded him. The mantis attacked him immediately, quickly approaching him because of this radiance and the feeling of power. The captain raised all the stats in his body to the maximum to give a worthy rebuff to the enemy. This made it possible to increase the speed of reaction and dodge the mantis's quick strikes. It also made it possible to try to counterattack with a repeat after each miss. He quickly approached him, jumped up and swung his axe, shifting his strength into his hand. The mantis managed to stop the attack by catching the axe with its fangs on its snout. Jang Chang-soo knew perfectly well that if the monster continued to press him, he would lose. The creature resorted to meanness while they were squeezing, and with its front paw, it pierced his leg. Unable to stand by any longer because of what he saw, Sonhu attacked the beast from the side. Having blocked the attack with one paw, he immediately swung the other to strike back. The hunter was hit in the stomach and quickly flew away. When he hit the wall, Cracks formed in it, and he lost consciousness. Having dealt with one, the mantis immediately pointed its front paw at the enemy in front of it. It went through the opponent's body and broke out on the other side. In pain, the axe fell to the floor, and God lifted the captain up above him. His strength was slowly leaving him because the pain was unbearable, and he did not want to realize that the monster had defeated him so easily. When he lost consciousness, the mantis threw the captain away from him. He hit the wall and fell face first to the floor from a great height. The mantis turned around and looked clearly at its next victims reflected in its eyes. Sanwoo took a fighting stance as it was their turn to fight. From what he saw, he determined that the beast was at least of the 8th rank, or even worse than the 5th. The main weapon of the mantis is its front legs, and they were as strong as Damascus steel, so I realized that it would be finished off before it tried to cut them off. As he approached them, they gradually examined his body in an attempt to find a weak spot. When the monster stopped, there was only one thought in my head that the creature was terrifying. But because he raised his paws up, one detail on the creature's body caught his eye. As he came closer, he could now see the connecting part between the legs and the torso. I wanted to believe that it was the same weakness. Taking advantage of the only chance, he quickly aimed his shot at that spot, but nothing happened, and I immediately felt as if the sword hadn't even entered me. And then I felt the paw of the beast hit him, and the feeling that he was flying fast somewhere. When he fell to the ground, a mantis immediately jumped into the air and headed for him. 2 sharp paws struck both sides of his head, causing his eyes to freeze in place. The creature slowly lowered its head lower and lower toward the enemy. As soon as they were face to face, Sanwoo closed his eyes, but the beast just looked at him. In my head, I was thinking that I had opened myself up too much, and if even the team commander couldn't handle it, how could he think that he could resist this monster? Then he felt saliva dripping from his mouth directly onto his face, and then heard a strange sound. The mantis raised its head in the direction of the sound and began to spread its wings. It was strange for Sanwoo to see that the monster reacted to the sound because he thought he was dead. Taking his 2 sharp paws away from him, he was still lying there, looking at what was happening. The creature both appeared and disappeared, leaving behind the question of what is going on here. After making sure that the danger was over, he fell headfirst to the ground and breathed out with relief that he was alive. Injan ran up and fell down on the circle and asked if he was okay. But he was more interested in why he left and whether it was because he was an ordinary person. And that strange squeaking sound I'd never heard before, and I thought it might be a way of communication between demonic beasts. Injan waved her hand in front of his face and asked him to gather himself. Her shining bracelet made them remember the most important reason they were here at all. Sunwoo asked her if she knew how long ago the bracelet started glowing, but she didn't pay attention. It was a signal that the barrier was activated, and they should immediately return to the city. She turned her head and asked about the leader and Songhae, because at first glance, they seemed to be quite badly hurt. When we approached Jungchang and examined him, we were glad to see that his heart and important parts were not hit, and he just lost consciousness. Since he was unconscious, Sanwoo grabbed hold of him and threw him over his shoulders to walk back. And it needs to be done as soon as possible to take them to the doctors and ask her to help the hunter San. And also to be prepared for the fact that it will be difficult, because the way back is not easy and long. At the end of the mission, all those who were found were laid out in front of the city wall, while the guards made count. In total, there were 58 dead bodies, 17 wounded, 11 missing, and 86 participants in total. So this result was still quite good. But then the guard noticed that someone was approaching them from the right, albeit slowly. Blurry images of 4 people were visible behind the barrier. Even though they were tired, they managed to get to the city as a group. They were subsequently hospitalized and provided with all the necessary assistance. A man who came to the hospital to talk to them was looking for their room and heard someone arguing. Injan yelled at the leader to eat, as he needed to recover as quickly as possible. And if he doesn't eat, she will feed him with her fist and not even look at the team leader in front of her. She was interrupted by a knock on the door, after which a male person entered the room. He went up to the leader and apologized for disturbing him, as he was the deputy of the Bae-Jeong-song City Administration. Jung Chang-soo looked at him and also introduced himself to the man. Bae-Jin-sung smiled as he noticed that he was recovering quite quickly and asked if his healing abilities were not bad. The captain appreciated these abilities and was interested in what the city administration needed from them. He apologized, but he can't tell them in front of everyone that they need to be alone. Once he understood, he asked his team to leave them for a long time. As soon as they got out, Injong asked Song-hoo what he thought they were up to. He replied that they were most likely discussing remuneration. And he joked that if you look at it, he was just created to be a rich boy who knows no misfortune and does not understand how he survived in that terrible desert. Sanvu did not share their optimism, and he was embarrassed that a representative of the administration had come to talk to the desert residents. Beige and Sung called it a real miracle that they survived, and Zhang Chang-su immediately noticed that they had a good guide. He asked him if he knew the guide was an ordinary person, and the captain confirmed his words and added that he himself could not believe. Then the man adjusted his glasses and said that it was good that they all came back alive. The administration is in a difficult position because they did not expect such a result. As soon as the man left and the team returned, the leader told them what they had talked about, and Sonhu was seriously furious. Zhang Changsu asked him to gather himself and calm down, as there was nothing wrong with that. But he couldn't because he could not calm down because they were given only 2 places to get citizenship. But I couldn't understand why these places were given to this fool and Injin. The captain explained once again that it was the decision of the city administration and they had no choice. Sonhu shouted that it was all a blatant lie and did not believe them because what could they know? He said that if the leader wanted to give up his citizenship, it was his business. But if we judge objectively, he is the second strongest after him. Therefore, he does not understand why in the end, the choice fell on this person who was not even a target. Unable to stand it, the captain shouted at him to start paying attention to what he was saying and to stop shouting at them. Seongwoo turned his head and reassured Jung Changsu that he was fine and reacting calmly. Sonhu exploded with anger because of course he was okay because he was now a citizen of the city. The commander once again asked him to stop arguing, as everything was decided anyway. But he was already curious, because he thinks it was all his decision, because he thought those two didn't have close combat skills, so he just felt sorry for them. Zhang Changsu did not answer directly, but only said that they would be given all the other awards and would still have a chance to become citizens. Tired of talking, he decided to leave, shouting in his wake that he didn't care about rewards because no one knows when he will die in the desert. The commander turned to Sonvu and said that there was no doubt that he had saved them, so he asked him to accept citizenship without a guilty conscience, and he replied that he would gratefully accept such a generous offer. Sonvu had just accepted the assignment because of his citizenship and had no intention of refusing, but the problem was whether Sonhu would accept it. The captain reassured him that he was just very hot-tempered, but he was sure that he would soon calm down. Upon hearing this, Zhang Changsu replied that he wanted to believe that this would happen. Night descended on the hospital, and only moonlight illuminated their room. Poorly sleeping Sanwoo heard a rustling noise, opened one eye and looked in Sonhu's direction. I turned my head and saw him sitting for some reason, and why his head was looking straight ahead. Then he got up and quietly walked over to the commander's bed and looked at him intently. He clenched his teeth in anger and pulled out a knife, exposing its blade. He awakened his powers and directed them to his arm to increase the force of the blow. And he hit the place where the captain's heart was, who quickly woke up and grabbed the offender by the throat. Zhang Changsu shouted at him how he could betray him so vilely. Sonhu shouted that it was all his fault and stabbed him in the bottom even more. When the captain lost consciousness, he asked him how an animal that doesn't even have the ability to become a citizen before he did. And he has no intention of returning to the desert, so he will do everything to make it happen. He turned his head toward the bed and asked Sonvu if he had heard everything that had happened. He walked up to the screen, pushed it aside with his hand, and abruptly burst into his bed. He hit the robe, shouting that everyone would get what they deserved and that it was all his fault. I threw the blanket off the bed and saw that there was no one under it. A stun grenade fell next to his foot and seemed to freeze a second before exploding. A bright light with a very sharp noise burst from the grenade and engulfed the offender. While he temporarily lost his sight and hearing, Sonvu attacked him from behind with a knife in his hand. He grabbed his head with his feet and pulled it to the side, exposing his neck. The knife went inside his neck without any problems because of the pain, and Sonhu screamed. Suddenly, the voice appeared again, ordering him to destroy and take them away, and he realized what it meant, which he did not think at the time. Because of this, he lost his vigilance, and the enemy fell backwards on the floor, hitting Sonva himself. Then he picked up his activated ability and hit him with his shoulder with all his might, nailing him to the floor. The blow was so strong that he started bleeding inside and coughed up blood. Sonyu looked at him and reached for the knife that was sticking out of his neck to take it away. Because of this, the blood was pouring all over the place, and he put his hand to stop it, but it was useless. He could barely whisper to him that he was not a meta person and a failure without ability. After taking one step, he fell unconscious, and the blood that was flowing non-stop made a puddle under him. Sanwoo was frightened, looked at his hands, and they were trembling because this was the first person he had killed. But he abruptly switched because Inexplicably, blue energy began to appear on his hand. The pain pierced his body, and it was like a waking up call. Pulling myself together, I thought that I could not lose consciousness while the evidence of the crime was here. He approached the knife with trembling hands and took it in his hands, quietly lifting it. He broke the window and threw the knife with all his might as far away from the hospital as possible. Suddenly, he heard the voice of the commander, who could barely pronounce his name. With fear in his eyes and sweat on his face, he cautiously turned to look at him. The next day, he woke up to a bright light, Bae-jin Sung standing over him, and people in the windows. He began the interrogation by saying that last morning the guards went to the ward after hearing screams. When they entered the ward, they saw the scene of the crime. There was 1 witness and 3 victims in the ward. The incident occurred a few hours before the bodies were found, when Hunter Kim Sung-hoo died of arterial bleeding in the middle of the night. And Hunter Jong Chang-soo also received injuries incompatible with life and bled to death. The only witness, Hunter Park In-jung, was removed from the list of suspects after checking her alibi and evidence. And he's the owner, Kim Seong-woo, who was found unconscious with blunt force trauma from all the Marlins. And now he's the only one who can testify. And they know that he was the team's guide for 3 years and was called to defend the city twice as a person without ability. But he apologized because he was a citizen and asked if the above was true. Sanvu turned his head to look at him and replied that yes, all of the above was true. Then Bae-jin Sung said he would ask directly what happened last night at the hospital. All he could think of was that a stranger broke into their room while they were sleeping. The man outside the window asked if he had heard correctly about the stranger. Sanwoo said that someone suddenly burst into their room and attacked. Bae-jin Sung was immediately asked if he remembered the attacker's appearance or clothes, but said it was very dark. The man behind the glass asked the deputy not to make a big deal out of it, as this case was related to people from the desert. We just need to leave the unknown attacker guilty as charged and increase patrolling. Bae-jin Sung understood them, but expressed his opinion that there was something strange about this case. The photo showed a lot of blood, but no traces of it were found outside the ward, nor were there any shoe marks. Therefore, it raised doubts about what Kim Sang-woo said, and therefore believes that he gave false testimony to cover up his crime. Sanwoo asked him if he could finally say something now that he had become a suspect. And as they said earlier, he is only a citizen without abilities. How then can we say that he was able to resist 2 meta people with physical enhancements at once? Bae Jinsun agreed that from the point of view of logic, this option was not possible. Before that, after the mission, he was supposed to get the status of a citizen. So why would he risk his life in a battle against meta people when he got the desired status? The deputy confirmed that the suspect's words sounded true because the Marlin team was an assault unit that had barely managed to obtain citizenship. Therefore, it is possible that the actions were carried out by other people who wanted to obtain the status of a citizen. In addition, traces of a fierce struggle were found, and if Kim Seong-woo was not a target, he must have been more seriously injured. Sanwoo recalled how Son-hoo had beaten him quite badly, and his body was able to survive the injuries thanks to his awakening. The senator asked Bae Jinsun what he was saying because he would not finish the case right now, but he asked for a minute. Because all of the above is based on the assumption that the owner, Kim Seong-woo, is not a meta-human being. The senator agreed that this was true and asked what to do now. The secretary turned to the door and shouted for the witness to come inside. Sanwoo wondered what kind of witness he could be talking about in a beer only the Marlins could know. A girl with quite familiar features came in, but because she was in the shadows, I couldn't really see her. Bae Jinsun asked her to introduce herself to them. She stepped out of the shadows and introduced herself as Marie, a researcher from the city's development department. The secretary asked her what kind of work she did, and she replied that she identified the characteristics of people's metapowers when she gave them a task. He asked how she did it, and Marie explained that she had certain abilities that determine whether a person belongs to metahuman. Bae Jin-sung said that based on what he heard, she was called here because of her abilities, then turned to Kim Seong-woo and asked if she was a meta person. He replied that he did not, and to make sure he was right, the secretary asked Marie to stand in front of the suspect. He added that there have been cases when meta people have awakened during their lives, despite the fact that they were originally ordinary people. Therefore, if he gained the ability on this task, he will then become a suspect. Marie approached Sanwoo, and they looked at each other in silence at first. He recalled that she had said back then that if he was a meta person, she would be able to help him in some way. And then when he pulled his hand away from her, she thought it was strange because she thought he was not an ordinary guy. The secretary asked her to identify it to either confirm or refute his hypothesis. She held out her hands to him and asked him to do the same. Then she closed her eyes and began to test, and her hands began to glow a bright color. Sanwoo also closed his eyes, and before his eyes was that picture from the hospital and the voice that ordered him to destroy it. When the commander tried to talk to him, he immediately ran to him. With the last of his strength, he asked him to escape before Sonwoo returned and destroyed him. Sanwoo felt very sorry for the leader because he could not even realize that the hunter was gone, and even in this state he was worried about him. When the leader took his last breath, it was clear that his strength began to leave him. The power began to be absorbed by Sanwoo's body, and the pain pierced more and more. The feelings inside were the same when he woke up a couple of minutes ago, but this time he felt something stronger. He fell to his knees, the energy just bursting out of him. And after it was over, he fell to the floor next to me and lost consciousness. Marie gave up and told B. Jinsun that she was done with the inspection. And he can say with certainty that Kim Seong-woo is not a meta person. He immediately asked her several times, but she assured him that the suspect was definitely an ordinary person. Sanwoo looked at her and mentally denied her words, knowing for sure that she felt that he was awakened before her. The senator coughed to draw attention to himself and said that since they knew the result, Marie could be released. Bae Jin-sung adjusted his glasses and agreed that they had finished the inspection and she was free to go. The senator proposed to consider this case as a case where those who did not obtain citizenship tried to do away with those who did. He also ordered to list all the targeted people who had not received citizenship among those participating in the defense as suspects and check their alibis. After listening to him, I asked him what they should do with Kim Seong-woo, but Sanwoo spoke up and said he would renounce his citizenship and return to the desert. The secretary didn't understand and asked why he had decided so, because the administration hadn't insisted on it. Sanwoo explained that from the very beginning, he believed that the leader Jong Chang-soo and the hunter In Jong deserved the right to citizenship. Bae Jin-sung warned that despite the fact that he had gone through a lot to live in the city, if he refused this time, he would have to go through it all again. I was also interested in the reason for his refusal and desire to return to the desert. Sanwoo looked down and said that it was just like he said, that it was because of his citizenship. If he stays a citizen to become a suspect in the destruction of his comrades, with whom he fought shoulder to shoulder for 3 years, he also doesn't want to get something that could put him in danger from an uncaught criminal. Since it sounded quite truthful, all suspicions were lifted, and he was released. When he had collected all his belongings, Sanwoo met Injin in the square to say goodbye. They stood in front of each other and talked about everything that had happened. As soon as we finished the conversation, we said goodbye, and Injin went about her business. Sanwoo also turned around and slowly headed for the exit of the city, looking around. When he suddenly heard his name called, he turned around and saw Marie running toward him. She stopped and breathed heavily because he walked fast and she had been running after him for a long time. Then I smiled because I was glad that they never found out that he was now a meta man and could leave the city in peace. The thought that she knew everything now stopped tormenting him, but now it was interesting to know what her plans were for him, that she didn't say anything to the tribunal. Marie added that she does not think he deliberately killed his comrades, but rather that he had no other choice. Sanwoo asked her openly why she didn't tell them the truth, knowing what she was doing. Marie answered openly because she was interested in his abilities, that she feels something new and exciting from him, because he sends out completely different signals from the rest of the meta people. I also asked him if he knew that all meta people are divided into 6 categories. Most of them involve physical enhancements over the powers of magic technology, taming evil with psychopathy or magic. But like Senator Beatrice, there are targets of people who do not qualify from whom other signals emanate. Sanwoo asked me one question. Doesn't she have extraordinary powers? Marie believes that her ability to create a barrier around the city is her greatest strength. Senator Beatrice is the only one who was able to maintain a barrier of several kilometers in size for a long time. Marie asked if he had any strange sensations when he woke up. Recalling that time, he said that before he woke up, he heard a voice in his head. She realized that people with psychopathy often hear orders in their heads. She also wondered what exactly that voice was saying to him. Sanwoo said he didn't remember, but he didn't want to tell her the truth, even though she was being friendly. Marie looked away, thinking it was strange because it couldn't be. And then I realized that I felt a certain feeling from him, similar to Senator Beatrice. He was very surprised by her words, and even opened his mouth a little in amazement. And he immediately said that he thought it was not so bad, but that he did not quite understand everything. And if she understands correctly, his abilities most likely work as an amplifying type, but she says that I feel such a signal from him, from Beatrice. Marie hastened to reassure him that no one expects such power from him because he has just awakened. The catastrophe associated with the emergence of demonic beasts almost pushed humanity into the abyss. But they were able to survive thanks to the meta people, and cities like Gwangmuin were finally able to build again. It became interesting if not just ordinary meta people got together, what kind of miracle they could create. The only concern was how much longer Beatrice would be able to hold out, because she had been sacrificing her health for the past decades. While maintaining the barrier around the city, one Sanvu immediately recalled how the leader said that she hardly slept. Now it was clear where such rumors came from among the desert dwellers. Suddenly, I felt a strange sensation in me and turned my head toward the tower and looked at it. Beatrice was standing there, looking down on him as well. And I realized that I was right, and they definitely locked eyes. Marie also looked towards the tower and said that the senator was doing everything possible with his last strength to protect the citizens. And his choice to believe her or not, but her ability to determine people's goals confirms this feeling. That's why he knows that he is not an ordinary metaman and feels that he has great potential, just like Senator Beatrice. He also believes that he will end the battle against the demonic beasts and may even be able to save humanity. The deaths of 2 people court a double awakening, and words ordering the destruction of the target people felt like his head would soon explode with information. And now the salvation of humanity, starting with the opening of the gates and ending with the almost complete destruction of humanity, which was only a few decades ago. Those who survived and settled in the desert dream of only one thing: survival, so it is not salvation that is important to them. And survival after returning to the desert, because here the strongest survive, and those who do not know their own strength met their end in it. And it made absolutely no difference whether this end came from a beast or a man. That is why, as a new goal, it is most important for a person to find out the nature of his or her powers. Having reached the place, he decided that he would test his strength in this ruined city of McDonough, which was the best place to train the newly awakened. When I was passing by a building, I stopped because I felt that someone was watching me from the darkness. The silhouette of a large head and 2 red glowing eyes appeared, and then he rose to his full height, and a demonic beast appeared and roared at him. Sanwoo did not expect to meet anyone so early, and this one was a 16th ranked demonic beast, a poisonous cat. The monster noticed that he began to take a few steps back and immediately attacked. A punch from his left paw flew over Sanvu's head, but he managed to dodge it. But I heard a strange sound, turned my head, and saw that the cannonballs flew out of the briefcase. The creature slowly crouched down, studying the enemy as it slowly walked in front of him. Waiting for the right moment, the poisonous cat tried to attack again. The paws of the healthy creature crumpled the roof of the car without any effort and flew away, glad to have bounced. Running forward, I looked back and thought that I couldn't escape, so I had to think about how to destroy the monster. When he saw the hatch below him, he leaned down and tried to lift it. At that moment, a force that enhanced physical abilities was activated, and the hatch easily came off the ground. Holding it in front of him, he shouted to the beast not to wait, but to attack it as soon as possible. The paw hit the hatch, and he managed to withstand it, and also managed to keep the weight of the creature above him. To get out of it, I came up with the idea to move sharply to the side so that the paw would fall, and then hit the manhole cover on the head. Stepping to the side, the caught fish began to unwind more firmly in place. After a good spin, he let the iron lid out of his hands and it flew at the monster. Abruptly, he grabbed it again and continued to approach the beast. Then he jumped up and swung the manhole cover over his head. The blow hit the beast's mouth, namely the closed teeth, which caused them to crumble. The cat immediately collapsed to the ground, creating a large amount of dust. Then Sanwoo came closer, calmly lifted the lid over himself again, took good aim, and destroyed the creature. The creature was defeated, and its green saliva immediately turned purple. After taking off his mask, he breathed a sigh of relief as he managed. But that wasn't the end of it. He took out a knife and easily separated the skin, reaching inside. I got to the beautiful kernels of the 16th rank, surrounded by intestines. After collecting them all in a bag created by myself, I thought that if I destroyed the poisonous cat, then now the goal is a person of the 16th level. It was also an interesting success, given that it was just the first test. Walking further, I looked up at the head where there was an inscription that this place used to be a desert oasis, where you could get everything. Looking around, I noticed that it was too quiet, but I also noticed that there was blood in one of the streets. Coming closer, he rubbed his fingers together and noticed that the blood had not yet clotted. But there was something else strange, namely that the blood was there, but there was no body from which it came. While he was thinking about whose hands it was, he heard something move behind him. Just in case, I decided to take out a knife to get closer and see what was there. When he pushed the door aside, he saw 3 children looking at him, frightened. I asked if they were people who lived here and didn't notice someone sneaking up behind me. As soon as I felt his presence, I immediately turned to look. I saw a masked man with knives in his hands rushing toward him. To stop the attacker, he waved his knife in front of him before he could get close. He then came up with a clever trick. He jumped over his head and pushed off the wall. He rushed to attack once again, coming at him quickly with the sharp end of the knife. Sanwoo had no desire to destroy him. He quickly stepped aside, pointed his elbow, and hit him in the stomach. The attacker was thrown to the side and crawled several meters on the ground. He sat up and put his hand behind his back, looking for something. He pulled out a gun and shouted at him to put down the weapon and raise his hands above his head. While he was holding him at gunpoint, the children from the defense came out and ran up to him. Turning to the wall at his request, he asked him to put down his weapon and talk, saying that his name was Kim Sanwoo and that he was a representative of Noda. He had no intention of harming them, he was just passing by. But he didn't care whether Noda was there or not. He shouted at him to leave everything he had and get out. Sanwoo asked him if he was sure he wanted to rob the man from Noda. If he didn't believe me, he could check by gathering his strength in his left hand so that he could see. I hit the wall in front of me, which cracked and my hand slipped inside. I said if they live in the desert, I'm sure they know what Nod is. The attacker said yes, and called the organization the last law of the desert. Sanwoo said that means they know that Nod doesn't rob, but only accepts tasks for a reasonable price. And I am sure that they know that if at least one of Noda's members is hurt, the organization will take revenge. Before that, I was sure it wouldn't fire because it didn't look like the gun was using a firing system, more like it was firing with a cannonball. Considering that each shot requires energy from the core and taking into account the acquisition of food, it will not just pull the trigger. He explained that he only wanted to stay in a safe city for a few days and then quietly disappear. The man agreed to believe him, but asked in return to give him the kernels he had to use as collateral until the next few days passed. Since he could take them by force later, I threw him a bag of kernels to calm him down. After I put it up, the person said that he was wrong about something. By pressing the core in the device, he activated the gun, which made it glow bright green. And he shot a beam of energy into the wall next to him, which even recoiled. Then he added that each shot really absorbs a valuable resource, so he won't be able to shoot whenever he wants, but he will be able to do it many times. As long as he had at least one core, Sanwoo was surprised as it looked like magic technology. After removing the mask, the guy who pretended to be Aaron and was a member of McDonough's Amatars and the shelter appeared under it. All the way up, Aaron kept Sanva in his sights, even when they started climbing the stairs. He asked the boy why they lived so high up in the building. Aaron replied that if they had only dealt with animals, they would have lived lower down, but being at a higher altitude gave them an advantage over humans. When they got to the right place, the children immediately scattered, each looking for their mothers. The guy took him to the woman and came over and whispered something in her ear. The woman put a special device to her throat and introduced herself as the leader of the Reina shelter. She apologized for this treatment, as she would have treated the guest better in the past. But now, they are in a state of battle with the killers, so they have a shortage of provision. Unfortunately, the demonic beasts were not the only enemies in the desert. There were also murderers who rejected humanity and began to hunt people. Sanwoo heard her and said that they were also a major problem for Nod, so he offered to make a deal. The woman said she was really desperate, but asked that as far back as she could remember, Nod always asked for something in return. He confirmed her words, but wanted to give them a chance, so he asked if they wanted to listen to it. First, he wanted to hear the situation, and then discuss the details of the contract, first asking where they were and how many of them there were. Reina replied that they were in the center, and there were about 10 of them. Sanwoo found it strange that there were not enough to cope. Then she said that they had killed many people, although they lost quite a few, because there were more than 100 of them before. This number also raised questions because it was difficult to collect food for so many people. Then the woman reported one nuance. They ate human meat, but there was a much bigger problem. The goal was to find people who had close combat skills. Sanwoo, worry, asked more seriously how strong they were. Answering honestly, she said that most of them were weak. Only their leader caused big problems. She only wanted to destroy these bastards for driving them like chickens into a cage, and she doesn't dream of anything else. Sanwoo listened to her and decided that he would accept the task of killing the killers, but the chairman said thank you for that, but they had nothing to give in return. But he noted that it was not true that it was enough to show them their magical master. Reina agreed to go and asked him to follow her. The three of them went into a room with many interesting things and objects. Aaron turned his head to the side and shouted Minya's name because she hadn't heard them come in. The girl looked out from behind the piles of things and looked at her guest. She was a magical master. Reina held up the device and asked her if her work was going well. But the Mini turned up her nose because even if she wanted to check the artifacts, she didn't have any cores. Sanwoo did not expect the magical technician to be so young. The chairman said that this was a person from Noda, and he would help them, and he also had a question for her. Looking at the table, I asked her if she created all these things herself. Minnie replied that she did, and he was also surprised that such a modest girl was making such high-level artifacts in such conditions. Sunwoo asked if he could see these things, but Minnie thought there was nothing to see. The first one to take the gun, which turned out to be very light, and she was quick to say that she made a mistake because the body could not withstand the recoil of the shot. Aaron shouted at the sight of this weapon and thought he would say goodbye to his life. Next, a rather strange sword with a hole in the handle caught my eye on the table. Taking it in her hand, Minnie said it was a melodic blade, but it wasn't a good product either, and Sanvu asked what the problem was with it. Because she wanted to increase the strength and heat, she attached a core to the sword for protection. In order to withstand the desired force, it needs more cores than previously expected, but if it makes a larger connector, the balance will be disturbed. And if you use it as an ordinary sword, its cutting properties do not even reach the level of an ordinary knife. Sanwoo thought about it a bit and said that he liked it, so he asked her to sell it. But she shouted that she wasn't going to sell it, and if he wanted to use it, he could have it for free. Sanwoo answered no because he was going to take the artifact for the treaty, but when he saw this sword, he did not want to take it just like that. He was also impressed by her talent and asked her not to stop experimenting with these cores. Thinking it was too much, Minnie pushed her hands back in his direction. Sanwoo put his hand on top and wanted to say something, and because their hands touched, something happened. It was as if something was pouring into his head, and he thought it was not magic technology. Aaron asked him what he was doing and looked at his hands. Even the chairman wondered if they were holding hands for too long since she was just a child. I jerked my hand and shouted that I shouldn't say such horrible things to him. Suddenly, like a spark, a voice inside my eyes spoke again to destroy and take away my power. But this time it was very unbearable to hear him. The sword fell out of his hands, and he took hold of his head. Reina looked at him and suggested that he take a little rest and clean up. Sunwoo said that she was right and that he should rest. And then she joked that if it was hard for him to fall asleep, she could sing him a lullaby. He replied that he was grateful, but that it was not necessary, and she asked him not to be so adult because she felt uncomfortable. When darkness descended on the shelter, Sanwoo lay on his bed, thinking about what that voice had ordered him to destroy again. He heard that sometime after waking up, the voice was supposed to go away. Closing my eyes, I thought that it seemed to me that the voice was only getting louder, not louder. After falling asleep, he woke up in the morning, but because of the dreams that disturbed him, he grabbed his head in an attempt to come to his senses. Later, he went to the roof and took binoculars to examine the enemy. Aaron explained that it was a killer's base, and he was worried that they were getting too close. Sunwoo asked him what he understood to be the purpose of a person, so he should know what his abilities are. But the guy said he barely managed to get away from him, so I'm not completely sure. But the only thing that was true was that the boss of the killers was very, very fast. Sanwoo listened and thought that he had not offered the agreement out of good feelings or pity. It was necessary for his abilities, but he could not let his guard down. Noticing that Aaron was fussing with the box, I asked him what was going on. He showed me that it was a sniper rifle that Minnie had finished and prepared for him yesterday. Using electromagnetic energy in the barrel, it charges and fires cartridges of cannonball. She also boasted that this rifle has almost zero noise and good combat power. Due to the lack of kernels, it could not be finished, and according to Minya, thanks to his kernels, she finished the development. After listening to him, he said he hoped this weapon would be useful. Aaron looked at him and said that he trusted Minya and her product. Sanwoo also said that he trusted her and just hoped that this sword would do what it was supposed to do. The guy asked me if he was going to use it because I had warned Minnie about it. Having calmed him down, I showed him the core and explained that he would not have to bother with it. Among the developments of Gwangmuin are core energy compression technology. Provided that the cores can be compressed, you can connect as many as 10 of them into one core. Sanwoo asked if he had ever been to the city, but Aaron said no, because he was born and raised in McDonough and had heard that this place was once a city, and also because I was very young, I could not remember anything from that time. Although he knew nothing, Sunwoo remembered that Mokdong was only part of a city known as Seoul with 10 million inhabitants, but nothing of it remained. Aaron's eyes widened when he heard how many people lived here, even more people than in Gwangmuin. With a heavy sigh, he said that he would like to live in the city someday. For some reason, Sanwoo's memory immediately recalled an image of Sonhu saying something similar. At the mention of this, he lowered his head and looked down. Gathering his thoughts, he waved his sword and said that he would see how good this sword was. He took a brick in his hand, threw it into the air, and then with one swing of his sword, split it exactly into 2 parts. Since the preparations were done, we just had to wait until nightfall to start acting. When the time came, Aaron quietly approached him and woke him up. Sanwoo thanked him for standing on the stirrup and asked him what they were doing. I looked through the binoculars and saw that they had lighting, and a guard was constantly standing and watching from the tower. He asked the boy if he could remove the guards from the towers when he went to visit them. The guard in the uniform yawned sweetly and didn't even see that someone had bent his backside. Sanvu quickly put a knife to his throat and told him to be quiet. As he tried to reach for the weapon, he slashed it across his neck, neutralizing it. At the noise coming from there, the guard from the tower turned the searchlight in that direction. He saw that one of his comrades was lying on the ground in a pool of blood beneath him. As soon as he opened his mouth to call for help, a beam of energy passed through him from above. When he was falling, he hit a spotlight with his hand, and it was directed at a window where someone was sleeping. Because of the bright light, the man woke up and tried to cover himself with his hand. But since it was light, I kept getting out of bed because I thought something was wrong. And in front of the entrance to his room, there were also guards to protect his sleep. Sanvu appeared suddenly, so the man had no chance to even see where the danger was coming from. Having destroyed it, I noticed for myself that it has always been so easy for the meta people to kill an ordinary person. Although this was not his first person on the account, he did not want to get used to this feeling. Suddenly, I turned my head in the distance along the corridor because I felt someone approaching. A bald man with a tattoo on his face stood there smiling and looking at him. But Sanva was confused by the fact that at first he did not even feel anyone's presence. Having taken up a combat position, the man immediately rushed to attack. Just before he approached him, he swung his sword, but he lowered his body and dodged. And without even noticing how the man managed to knock him down to the ground, he knelt down on his chest and asked him who he was and where he came from. But Sanwu did not want to say anything, but gripped his sword tightly and used his awakened powers. The man immediately noticed this because he realized that he was not an ordinary person. To avoid endangering himself, he jumped back a few steps. I shouted to him to ask him if he was a metaman. Then he smiled again, as it became more interesting, and considered that this place was a little too cramped for combat, and they needed to leave. Sanvu didn't like his words at all. They only alarmed him more. The impact knocked down a window in that corridor, and all the guards heard the sound of the glass. When he fell to the ground, he barely got up. His body was trembling, and his head was bleeding. When I heard more movements, I looked up and saw that the man had jumped out of the window after me. He landed on the car behind him, and with his weight squeezed even the roof. At that moment, the guards ran out into the streets and shouted "Boss." He asked them not to approach, as the stranger in front of them was his prey, and then he noticed that a beam of energy rushed past him. Then he saw where she was coming from, and managed to easily avoid the next shot. Aaron tried his best, but the man in the crosshairs was too fast. The boss told his men that there was a sniper in the house to the west, and they had to get rid of him. Since no one else was disturbing him, he could easily take on the uninvited guest. He was jumping from side to side, dodging all attacks and mocking him for being too slow. For an interesting trick, the man stepped into the middle of the tire with his foot. He immediately threw the tire in Sanvu's direction with a swing. He easily managed to split it in half, but did not expect the enemy to follow. Playing with him, he did another trick and kicked the sword out of his hand. The sword fell to the side of him, and he had to make a quick dash to get to. But he turned his gaze to himself because he noticed that he could not use his power properly. Sanwu did not want to talk to him and pulled out a knife, which was on his left side, silently looking at his opponent. The person then offered to join him, as he would teach him how to fight and use force. Sanvu smiled at the suggestion, but it did make him say that he didn't want them to plunder the deserts together. He immediately apologized because the voice in his head was very loud, asking him to finish him off right now. The assassin's boss licked his lips because in that case, he would be the main course for tonight's dinner. The two of them joined again in battle, two energies raging around them. Meanwhile, the others ran to the house where Aaron was and began to climb the stairs. Not looking at his feet, one of the guards did not notice the trap and hit it with his foot. Aaron heard the explosion and smiled because he had tried very hard to set these traps, so it would be great if they found them all. Despite the fact that Sanwu was using physical reinforcement, the boss managed to hit him with powerful, fast punches. He managed to stay on his feet, but was thrown several meters away. He tried to calm himself down because the enemy was much more experienced in combat than he was. On top of all this, Sanvu realized that he had almost no experience in fighting meta people. But having fought a lot with demonic beasts, he came up with a way to pretend that he was not a human being. I decided to treat him as a demonic beast in human form and calmly analyze his behavior. I threw away all my beliefs about how people behave. Arna was watching them all the time, and those who managed to get to the roof stopped in front of the closed door. He only kept telling them that they could knock as much as they wanted, but the door would not open. The boss continued to deliver powerful blows to his face, and it was clear that he was enjoying the fight. One blow was such that when Sanvu saw the metal crumple, he was glad he had missed. He determined that his characteristics were speed and strong kicks, and he wondered what would happen if he managed to shorten the distance. As soon as he tried to do so, the enemy managed to evade him because he had calculated such a move. And in addition to that, he was able to counterattack with a powerful knee strike against him. Sanwu immediately flew away from his leg like a toy. The boss went after him, deciding that he would end it with a knee and a kick from the top. But hoping that his men had dealt with the sniper, he forgot about him and did not expect a shot. Being wounded, he decided to hide behind cars and not put himself at risk. Aaron clenched his teeth as he hid like a rat in the corner. The boss was holding his wound and getting angry as the little bastard on the roof started bothering. So I decided for myself that even though I was late starting with the main course, I decided to go and eat my appetizer. When Aaron saw him approaching him quickly, he screamed and called him a monster. Since the boss was so angry, he stopped feeling his wound and was only focused on his prey. After firing so many shots, Aaron noticed that the cannonball's energy was almost gone. When the sniper stopped shooting, the boss got as close as possible to the building and crouched down, transferring energy to his legs. I jumped so high that I could easily reach the roof. Aaron stood there shocked, his mouth open, that he had managed to bend down to him to such a height. He managed to defend himself from the first fool by raising his gun above him. It also gave me a chance to jump back quickly and get my crossbow from my back. After charging it, and as soon as the dust settled, he aimed it at the enemy. The man first looked at him, and then smiled and asked if he was from McDonald's. But Aaron just kept silent and shot an arrow. But this weapon was too slow for him. The guy immediately hurried to get the second arrow and quickly loaded the crossbow. When he took one step in his direction, he shouted at him not to come any closer. He pulled the trigger again, and the boss managed to easily move his head to the side so that it flew by. When he got in front of him, he called it a snack and hurried him to shoot as soon as possible. Aaron sent everything to hell, pulled the trigger again, and the arrow flew out. But the third time around, the boss didn't dodge it. He caught it right in front of his face. The picture made the guy sweat because it was impossible to do that. He told him that such toys were no match for him and broke the arrow with just one hand. Although Aaron was scared, he did not want to give up, so he tried to hit him with a crossbow. But the boss was able to quickly dodge and go behind his back because he opened up. I immediately threw him to the ground and put my hands behind my back to stop him from moving. Aaron yelled at him to let him go, but he could do nothing else. The boss reached for the sharp end of the arrow he had just broken. He hit the guy's back, tearing his clothes to get to his body. He liked his screams because he believed that a good dinner is not complete without good music. He looked at him and called him garbage, not a human being, and told him to just finish him off. The boss said he wouldn't kill him right away, but if he kept talking, he would lose his tongue first. But I still thought he would need his tongue because I wondered how much of it would be left when he stopped screaming. The more Aaron screamed, the more the assassin's boss laughed and enjoyed the anticipation of dinner. But suddenly his attention shifted to the door at the back because there was some noise. Sunwoo dealt with the rest of the guards and kicked the door to the roof. When I looked at the guy, I immediately checked whether his arms and legs were in place. The boss said that because he was so early, he was able to intervene right before the fun began. He said that he would have been faster if they hadn't scattered all kinds of garbage on the stairs, and that he was the only one who was going to do anything. But the boss called his men fools, who he would not miss because they were easy enough to gather and would rather enjoy their food. While he was talking, Aaron jumped on his back and shouted that he should taste it. This trick provided an excellent opportunity to attack and strike the enemy in the most valuable part of his body. He fell right on the column, screaming in pain and cursing how they dared to cut off his leg. Sanvu replied with anger in his voice that it was a pity that his favorite leg was not with him. The boss's teeth clenched as he suffered excruciating pain and called him an animal through them. Sanvu waved his sword at him and told him that he was the only animal among them. In one clear movement, he hit him, and his blood splattered around. Immediately, a voice appeared to praise him and ask him to destroy people's metas and take away their strength. After that, just like in the hospital, he was overcome with pain and energy enveloped his body. Since I lost consciousness, I woke up in the car and asked what happened. Aaron saw that he was awake and said that he had suddenly fainted and scared him very much. Because I could not leave him there alone, I dragged him into the car. Sanvu noticed that the boy had a lot of energy despite his weak appearance and asked what he was going to do with the car. Aaron took everything they had taken from McDonough and even found precious gasoline here. Sanwu asked him if he knew how to drive it, and he said that he had driven abandoned cars several times. As the car started, I could hear what kind of music those bastards were listening to. To put it mildly, they were both surprised by what was playing there. Sunwoo said that this was a song by Idol, a band that was popular not long before the Cataclysm, and that the criminals' taste did not match their image. Although we were a little shocked, we could listen to the song, and it was time to go. Suddenly, a red flare gun lit up high above the skyscrapers in front of him. Sunwoo immediately asked if the signal was coming from his shelter. Aaron replied that yes, it was an alarm, but its color was alarming inside. A girl immediately ran up to Reina and did her best to inform her about the threat. At first she thought she had some news about Aaron and Sonva, but it wasn't about them. Suddenly, it is not clear why the demonic beasts began to run as if from an earthquake. They went outside and the girl told her to look to the southwest. Minnie, who was already on top, showed Rain the direction to look. Through the binoculars, I saw small animals that looked like rats running away quickly. Minnie asked her not to look down at those little creatures, but to look up. As soon as she picked it up, she saw a monster with wings and a scythe in its hands hovering in the sky above them. She knew what it was and immediately shook, because the monster that had disappeared many years ago had somehow appeared here. His accounting resembled a demon, a creature from nightmares that could destroy an entire country's army with a flick of its wing. An S-rank demonic beast that will never be forgotten by the survivors of the Belkist Cataclysm. The monster raised his scythe above him and looked clearly in the direction of the shelter. Then he waved it, and a large blob of dark energy flew in their direction. The house instantly split in half as if it had been cut with a sharp knife. Sanwa asked us to stop the car for a minute to discuss something. If there is a medium-ranked monster, he can at least help, but the signal is red, which means that a demonic beast above the average rank is approaching. But Aaron explained that it means that a monster of catastrophic proportions is approaching, so you need to run away without looking back. Sanwoo immediately shouted that beasts of this rank are creatures that humans cannot handle. Therefore, nothing will change even if he comes there. They should leave as soon as possible. When the car stopped because Sanwoo got into the driver's seat, they turned their heads to see a bunch of monsters coming at them. They started to hit the car, causing it to roll over. When I hit my head, I lost consciousness, but after a while I woke up and managed to get out of it. Even at first, he didn't realize how much time had passed and Aaron wasn't there, so he thought he must have gone there. He put his hands on the car's wheel, activated his power, and began to turn it over. As soon as the car was on the wheels, he mentally asked Aaron not to blame him, because in the desert, survival is the highest priority. Even if they survived, everything would be over now if a demonic beast of that rank razed everything to the ground. The further you moved away from that place, the more memories from there came to mind, especially when the children ran to their mothers. These thoughts got on my nerves because they made me doubt the correctness of my actions. Meanwhile, Aaron tried his best to run to the shelter in the hope of saving someone, and when I ran, I saw bodies lying around the room and mothers holding their children in the hope of saving them, but no one survived. While looking at this horror, a piece of the building collapsed behind him. Realizing that someone was on the roof, he ran up there and saw that the head of the shelter was covered in blood. Since she could not speak, she raised her hand to show that there was someone behind him. This was the last thing she did when Aaron leaned over her and saw a large shadow appear. He turned his head, and his eyes were stunned by the horror of what stood before him. A huge monster stood over him and watched his actions. Belkis stooped over them and stared intently into his eyes, as if he wanted to see something. Suddenly, a portal opened in the sky, illuminating the dark sky and a strange sound. The monster immediately noticed and left Aaron alone on the roof. When he disappeared, I was able to relax, even though I didn't know what had just happened, and was glad to have survived. He went up to Reina, closed her eyes, and fixed her hair, thus paying his respects to her. He also apologized to her for not being able to protect them, and burst into tears as he fell on her. After saying goodbye to her, I went downstairs to gather supplies and take a good look around. The more I shone, the more I found dead people. No one survived. But there was one more thing that worried me. Where was Minnie, since I couldn't find her among the others? Shining a light on the refrigerator, I noticed that the food was thrown out of the fridge for some reason. When I ran to it, I prayed only that she would be alive, and I opened it and saw her. She rushed to hug him and cry. Aaron hugged her too, and said he was very happy that she had survived. He took her, and they slowly walked to the exit as it began to dawn outside. As soon as he came out, the sun made it impossible to see who it was standing in front of them. Sanwoo looked at him and said he was glad he had survived. Aaron was also happy to see him and that he had come for him. Then he immediately asked if there were any other people who had survived the attack. But Aaron lowered his head and said no. If so, he wanted to know what had happened to make only 2 of them survive. And then Aaron said that they saw it, but it passed by after it had studied him. It reminded Sonva of the time a black mantis had looked at him, but it could have been a coincidence. I asked the guy what he was going to do now, and whether he had anywhere to go. In this case, assessing his silence, I asked if he wanted to try himself as a guide. Upon returning to Nod, he is going to gather his team of hunters, so right now he is in the process of recruiting people. Minnie will create various crafts with the help of magical technology, and he will be a guide, so if you like the idea, you can invite him to Nod. Aaron sniffled because he was not sure if he would be able to take them with him and could not finish because he was crying. Sanwoo asked me to stop snotting here because he doesn't like it. On the way, he explained that there are many different groups in Noda, and he belongs to the 17th branch with Kim Busick as its head, though he looked old, but still wow. As we were driving, Minia caught sight of an amazing building and asked us to stop. It was an energy extraction plant that collected carbon emissions from the burning of garbage and processed them into energy. Minnie asked him to speak to her more easily, since she is even younger than Aaron. She asked if she could take a closer look, because it was so cool that garbage can be recycled into energy. Sanwoo replied that we could look around, since Area 17 was not far away anyway. They came out and approached a strange sphere with green smoke inside. Minnie put her hands on top of the sphere, and a bright glow appeared around her. Sanwoo was surprised that she could understand the principle of the mechanism in one touch. The skill of magical technology was really impressive. Then he pointed to the field and said that this place was partially rebuilt by Kim Busick, who redesigned the field and made that installation, because not everything depended on the battle with the monster. Since people need to continue living, Aaron suddenly apologized for interrupting his story, because he saw a deer walking in the field, which did not even notice them because of the noise. Putting an arrow in the crossbow, he said that it would be their dinner. The arrow fell before it reached the beast, but it was frightened, looked at them, and ran away. Before Aaron could even understand anything, Sanwoo flashed by him, catching up with the deer. He quickly caught up with him, running after him in his footsteps. When he saw him, he overtook him and ducked down in front of him, cutting his throat with a knife. After a while, they waited for Sanwoo to leave the field, and he was not walking alone, but carrying the prey. They were shocked, especially Aaron, who immediately shouted out how he had managed to do it. And if you think about it, he thought he had seen this running before. Sanwoo put his hand on him and said that he knew what he was thinking and asked him not to worry. He will explain everything when he gets a chance, but he asked me to keep this secret between them. Looking at the guy, I realized that he most likely realized that it was the killer's intense running, and it was only when he used this skill that he realized it. He also finally realized what his ability was, namely, to absorb the skills of other people. But to make them his own, he realized that he possessed a truly absurd skill. His attention was diverted by Minnie, who noticed the air stations that were still working. She was surprised because it was the first time she had seen them since she had never left McDonald's before. It was amazing for Sanwoo to see that she absorbed any information like a sponge, and I am glad that she is alive. She came back with bright eyes and asked if she could meet the person responsible for it. Sanwoo replied that of course, when they arrived, she went to the car and shouted to hurry up. She urgently needed to talk to him. A little over a year later, they reached Zone 17, which was an abandoned stadium. Getting out of the car, Sanwoo said that there was a stadium here before the disaster. Now they had to look at the chairman first. As soon as they entered, Jamie jumped out of her seat in surprise. She had a lot of questions about what happened and who the children were next to him. She immediately called the manager to inform him that Sanwoo had returned with the two children. Giving them tea, I was glad that he was able to return safe and sound, as everyone was shocked after Injin's call. Sanwoo asked if she called when she had already become a citizen in Gwangmuin. Jamie asked me not to remind you because after the leader's death, the manager was in shock, and the hunter Sanhu also ended up badly. And 2 kilometers away from the crime scene, they found the object used to destroy them. However, no fingerprints were found on it, so the perpetrator has not yet been caught. While drinking tea, I thought that I had flown 2 kilometers, then the abilities of the awakened ones were really incredible. But if no fingerprints were found, it means that a person who enjoys great trust got involved. Jamie was angry because if he had left the city long ago when she called, he should have been here by now, and since he was not there, they thought he was dead as well. Sanwoo explained that he had to do something on the way and these children were assigned to that case. And since there was some information to discuss, he asked me to go to the office for a while. She was grinding her teeth because he made a face as if nothing had happened. Sanwoo explained that there was nothing he could do about it, as they had already done everything, and that this discussion was related to his return. Jamie calmed down because if she talks like that, she must have something important to say. Standing by the window, she turned to him and told him to say what he wanted. Sanwoo asked if she knew about the shelter in McDonough, and if so, it was now completely destroyed. But she doesn't understand what's so special about it, because it's not a rare occurrence for shelters in the desert to collapse. Asking her to be quiet, he He whispered quietly that there was an S-ranked monster, Belkis. The girl's face immediately changed. She opened her mouth, her eyes became wide, and her skin seemed to turn even more white. She immediately asked if he was sure because Belkis had never been to the Korean peninsula. He shouted that he was sure because, except for him and those two children, all the people from the shelter in Mokden and the group of killers were killed. Jamie asked to wait because Nod is annoyed that there are such killers, but according to him, it turns out that they all went to Belkis. Sunwoo knew what he was doing, even though it was a little bit wrong, and he didn't want to easily correct the truth because he had to worry about a lot of things without it. She asked him what happened to that monster, and he replied that he disappeared into the portal after destroying the shelter. Jamie lowered her head as she felt sorry for the people of McDonough, but on the other hand, it was good that more people didn't die. Sunwoo told her that he had a hypothesis about Belkis's behavioral pattern, and she said that even that was very much appreciated. He continued to say that it looked like the beast was using body temperature to track people. She immediately interrupted him, or was there any evidence to support this theory? Sunwoo said that those children hid in the refrigerator, and that's how they survived. Jamie immediately entered this information into the system as it would be very useful in the future. Sunwoo asked her that it would be very nice if she gave a good price for it. To reassure him, I told him that the price for such information was at least 40 cores. When he heard this, he suggested that instead of the kernels, he would like to receive information that is no less important. He wants to find a lonely, goal-oriented person who can lead a team. She wondered if he would try to find the team that was looking for a guide, but if he wanted to, Nod would have found a team instead, so why would he waste such precious cores? So that she would have fewer questions? He quietly said that he had woken up. Only she and the branch manager knew about it, so she asked them to keep quiet. Jamie asked him what his ability was and his rank, and Sunwoo replied that it was an amplifying ability of about 15th rank. This made her shake because it meant that he was a middle-class person. It was incredible information, as the best guide of Zone 17 became a metaman. And that's why he wanted to create a team with himself in the center, and he was going to take his children with him. Jamie was a little shocked because first the best team in the branch fell, and now their guide was back alive and kicking. Kim Busick kindly took him in, smiled and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. I immediately noticed that the world is really changing very quickly. Even the friends who seem to be always there for me have left this world. And the snotty sucker sitting in front of him has finally become an adult. Sunwoo joked with him that he shouldn't forget that he had been a bit old. He laughed because that's why he asked me not to cause him trouble. But then he asked if it was true that he looked older than his years. And they looked at each other and remained silent. He called them silent jackals. But he was glad that he returned safe and sound. In addition, he asked the awakened person whether he wanted to hide this fact. Sunwoo replied that he wanted only he and Jamie to know about it. The chairman said that people at the head office are more loyal to Metinvest, so he doesn't quite understand why he needs to keep it a secret. Sunwoo looked at him and answered honestly that since he was his hero, not Nod. The manager laughed, called him a jackal because he liked to hear such things, and asked about his children. He explained that he was going to make them part of his team. He will teach one of them the skills of a guide and a fighter, as he believes that the boy is very talented, and he will take the second one to his team as a magical technologist. Kim Busick could not even imagine that he would ever find such a person. Thus, he realized that he wanted to take this girl to the team so that Nod could take her to make artifacts of an attacking type. Sunwoo expected such ingenuity and added that if his team could get a task, he would like a task to kill the assassin. The manager realized that now his subordinate wanted to hunt people and thought that he had been living in this world for too long. Since Sunwoo wanted to get on with his business, he answered with his own words that the world was changing rapidly. And finally, I remembered and asked Jamie if she could gather everyone from Zone 17. She threw up her hands and asked if they were going to take everyone out of the zone, and she heard that they were. A little over a year later, a crowd of people gathered outside the office and took turns approaching Sunwoo. He would take people by the hand, close his eyes, and wait for 30 seconds for something to happen. If nothing happened, he would thank them and call the next person in line. The next man was subjected to the same procedure, and he grabbed the arm of the silently standing man. A woman standing behind them was indignant at what they were doing and why they took everyone away from their work. Calling for the next one, the woman pushed the man in the side and shouted at him to move. I held out my hand to him and grumbled to him to do what he wanted as soon as possible. Sunwoo apologized for distracting her, took her limb, and repeated the procedure. Suddenly, an electric shock went through his and her bodies. She took her hand away and looked at him with a frightened look, asking what he had just done. Standing there, I looked at her in confusion and asked myself if this woman was also a metahuman. Sanwoo apologized to her and asked if she could give him her hand again. Although she was outraged that she felt strange after that time, she reached out to him. Closing her eyes, the voice inside her appeared to destroy her and take away her powers. The woman asked him if he was acting strangely, and it took her breath away. Ignoring her words, I asked if she had any interest in hunting demonic beasts. She didn't understand what he wanted to say, even though he was cute and flirted badly. But Sanwoo tried to ignore her words, and thought to himself that he had heard that voice for sure, and that he was facing a person with very bad behavior. He sent it, and thought that it would be a great opportunity to find a good candidate for the team, but unfortunately he would have to forget about his partner in this area. Then he loudly told the people that today they could all be free. That red-haired woman asked him to wait, because he made these people waste time and didn't even say why. Her behavior was disgusting, and she does not think that she crossed all the boundaries, and said that she is now disrespecting a member of the Nod with her behavior. Didn't she know that in order to survive in the desert, everyone had to know their place? I thought about it for a while, because I didn't know he was connected to the organization. The men who were behind her shouted, asking if she was okay. Sunwoo asked who they were, and Jamie said that if he knew Kang Hyung-soo, they were his subordinates. When the woman was surrounded by men, she said that she would like to spend more time with him, but they would not let her. Jamie also added that this red-haired woman was Kang Hyun-soo's wife. Although he was kicked out of Nodu, the manager took them in. The woman asked how the guild would react now, and Sanwoo angrily replied that such support did not give him the right to behave like that. One thug didn't like his words and threatened him with violence. Grabbing them by the collar and pulling them to him, he asked them to repeat what they had just said about their sister. But he was more angry that even this fool and she violated personal boundaries so easily. Suddenly, an arrow flew into the thug's arm and pierced it through. Aaron shouted that he would kill anyone who dared to touch their Sanwoo with a finger. Jamie and Sanwoo looked at them and wondered what they were doing there. The woman shouted at them why they were standing there like idiots, just two snot-nosed kids, so they should let them down as soon as possible. As soon as the two moved in their direction, the next arrow fell in front of them with a kernel on the end. They were afraid of being hit and shouted to get down because it was going to explode. The woman got really angry and called them fools because the arrow was fake. Aaron from above confirmed her words, but if they don't stop, the next one will be real. She shouted for them to gather their courage because even with such arrows, they would not dare to blow them up in the exchange center. Seeing that they were not afraid of them, Aaron decided to show them something else and turned to Minya and asked to see it. Minnie got a grenade launcher, and now everyone who was downstairs was no longer having fun. The red-haired one was also afraid and threatened that this was not the end and that she would get even with them. Aaron laughed at her, stuck his tongue out at her, and shouted in her wake that he couldn't wait to see her. They left, even though they were humiliated and could do nothing about the situation and would rather not get involved with desert fools. Jamie was outraged by her words because she spoke as if she were not a desert dweller. Sanwoo looked at his team and asked if they were still doing well, but the two of them were happy to have left the situation on a high note. Sanwoo grabbed his head because he did not realize that they would cause so many problems and realized that the road ahead was not easy. After everyone left, Jamie told Kim Busik everything and asked him what he thought Sanwoo was looking for. In his opinion, he was looking for useful meta people to join his team. I didn't ask her to do it because I thought it was not enough, and also because I was probably looking for people who were just about to wake up. I have heard several times that meta people can feel each other. Tai generally appreciated that Sanwoo had figured out how to use the ability to identify the right people. Jamie only added that she probably shouldn't have invited Shin Yoon-hee because of her behavior. In addition to her nasty behavior, she also lives far away from the battles. Kim Busik hastened to explain that no one knows what a person has gone through and that they may never have had a chance to use their talent. Even now, Sanwoo is back as a metahuman, and since I remembered for him, I figured out how to help him grow faster. The next day, Sanwoo took Minnie and Aaron out into the desert to train. I asked the girl if she had prepared a flag, but still hoped that they would not have to use it, and that if they did, she would not hesitate. He also emphasized that she should calculate the radius correctly, because you can't use a bazooka like you did last time, because it can hit him. While explaining further, Aaron turned in the other direction as he noticed someone approaching them. 3 figures of some people were traced in the desert dust. Sanwoo thought it was the hunters, because no one else could know about their training location except Jamie. Aaron came back and asked the name of that skinny girl and asked what her last name was. Sanwoo said that it wasn't her. Minna wondered who it was, because she knew that he knew all the hunters around. Two men and a girl emerged from a cloud of sand, one of them smiling, saying that he knew something was wrong. Holding out his hand in front of them, Sanvu asked them to stop and introduce themselves first. But the man with the tail said that it would be a bit problematic because they were in the middle of a secret mission. I asked him if they were the new team of the 17th zone. The fact that he knew who they were made him seriously worried. The man also added that he looked like a small, anxious cat. Aaron jumped in front of him to watch his words if he didn't want him to tear out his tongue. When I approached it, I was delighted because I had never seen anything like it before. The arrowheads on his belt are not made of cannonballs. This technology was really impressive and very interesting. Pulling out a knife without being seen, Aaron threatened to listen to him, because if he dared to touch someone else's weapon, he would not be safe. Then the man raised his hand above him and calmed him down as he was about to leave. He didn't want to spoil their fateful meeting, so he suggested that they live together. Sanvu, who was watching the situation from the side, realized that it was Aaron who was in danger. Since I didn't even notice how the big guy drew his sword, the girl with the scythe looked like the leader, so I was even more afraid of the thugs. They were clearly not ordinary people, and why they appeared before them. A man came up to him and said that judging by his reaction, Kim Busik had not told him anything. Sanvu immediately asked how he knew him, and the man was even more surprised because the old man hadn't said anything at all. Therefore, he introduced himself as a covert team of Zone 17. This should be surprising since the manager did everything to keep this information secret, and if they were known, they would not be a secret team. The girl introduced herself as Hunter Kwan Sung from the Code Blue team. When Kim Hyun was healthy, he had a strange habit of starting to speak only when someone spoke to him first. And he was the leader of the Code Blue team of Lee Jingxing, so he will be familiar. Then we shook hands, and he introduced himself as Kim Seung-woo, the commander of the Pojier team. The name comes from the word devourer, and Lee Jensing thought the name sounded angry and cool. But he named the team because he named it after his skill and wanted to indicate that it absorbs other skills. Kwan Sena also appreciated the name because at least it was better than Code Blue. From the very beginning, they were actually Team Blue, but because the commander said it didn't sound cool, they added a random word. Hin also said that only later they learned that it was a medical term. The commander asked him to close his mouth because he opened it when he didn't need to. Kwan Sena also decided to make a joke by issuing an alarm that Code Blue cardiac arrest alarm. Sanwoo looked at them, but remembered a conversation with Kim Busik, how he also told him the name of the team for the first time. The manager could not think that he would choose this name again, but Sanvu did not understand what he was talking about. He went on to say that an ordinary person as a guide and a magical technologist are not the most balanced team. He needed someone with Sanwoo's melee skills and didn't expect any other tips from the branch manager. He will ask Jamie to look for candidates for his team, and it will be difficult to find people outside the team. But Sanva did not care, because if she ended up with someone she could trust, the wait would be worth it. Then the manager said that the shelter in Bukan would disappear in a month. There is a talented meta person there, and he is going to invite him to join their team. Sanwoo noticed this because he could only know this if he had the skills to look into the future. But he just laughed, because if he had such skills, he would not have sent Changsa to his doom. To move on to another topic, he asked if he was in the process of training children. I was also worried that his awakening was late, but it was so easy to move forward. Sanwoo again noticed that the manager seemed to know that he would wake up, but he laughed and repeated that he could not look to the future. Although Kim Busik speaks rather vaguely, I am sure that he knows everything that will happen. The manager wanted to build a good team, so he asked me to use this opportunity to consolidate the basic. It seemed to Sanv that the old man was definitely up to something, but he kept smiling and denying his words. Returning to this situation, I realized that Kim Busik read him like opening a book, never knowing how much the old man knew, and it even scared me sometimes. Lee Jessen said that they had come to help them with their training, but if they were convinced that they were not doing well, they would take them over. So if you think you can't handle it and you're not sure of yourself, it's better to give up right now. Sanwoo was still thinking and decided that it didn't matter what plans the manager had, so he would just do what he said and take advantage of his rare ability. Then he replied that if a fight means a fight, then to make it more fun, we had to come up with a punishment. Lee Jingxing liked that he was in a good mood and that he needed to show his basic skills first. In this case, Sanwoo asked them to evaluate the skills they had trained. He turned to Aaron and gave him a stern look to let him know that time had begun to run out. He took a jar out of his pocket, opened it, and poured a strange substance onto the sand. Judging by their reaction, I realized that this was the first time they had ever smelled the rotten flesh of a demonic beast. To get rid of this smell, they decided to stand back and watch. Sanwoo ordered everyone to take up their fighting positions, and they would begin. Kwansung asked the leader what they were going to show them, but he remained silent. Sanwoo shouted to his team that the creature was here, so he quickly ordered them to disperse. Code Blue did not fully understand what they were going to do. As the creature approached, Sanwoo clenched his fists and activated his powers. Suddenly, a creature emerged from the ground, and when it broke free, it covered the sun with its shadow. A huge monster that looked like a worm with sharp protrusions at the end of it was floating in the air. The worm against Sanwoo was of an impressive size, and it was hard to believe that such a creature lived underground. As far as he knew, the ugly worm could attack in two ways. It can break through the ground and swallow ground target, or it jumps into the air and absorbs the target upon landing, after which it disappears underground. So, to increase your chances of winning, you need to destroy the worm before it goes back underground. It had to be cut along the length where its parts met. The team that was watching saw what he was doing, but he only broke the surface with this movement. He shouted that it was time for Aaron to act and to shoot an arrow. The arrow with the core was stuck just in the wound of the worm a few seconds before the explosion. The explosion caused the worm to rise into the air and growl in pain. Lee Jingsing assessed why Sanwoo had to carry that wound to blow up the place, but Kwansung was more interested in how they placed the explosive energy of the core in the middle of the arrow. At this time, Sanwoo rushed to attack the wounded beast to inflict more wound. As soon as the sword went inside, he immediately ducked to the other side, to allow Aaron to get another shot at the wound, and to prevent him from being hit by the explosion. When it hit the target, the second explosion was even stronger than the first. Lee Jingsing appreciated the focus of such a young man, and recognized that he had talent. There was one thing that was true, but the team in front of them lacked firepower. After attacking from close range, Sanwoo would immediately retreat, and the guy would hit from a distance. A good plan. But the worm would not be hurt by the attacks, only angry. Sanwoo noticed that the worm's attack pattern was changing, so he shouted to Min to get ready. She took out a pistol she had invented and took good aim at the monster. The blue team didn't even realize what it was. It felt like a toy. The recoil of the minigun was so high that the little girl was knocked back. She still managed to hit the creature, but the explosion sent the sand flying in all directions. Aaron and Minnie looked in that direction, waiting for the dust to settle to see if it was over. But Sanwoo, who was very close, saw that the monster was still moving. So he ran to attack and shouted to Aaron to keep shooting at him. After another explosion, there was so much dust that it was impossible to see anything at all. When she sat down, Sanwoo saw that the monster had managed to escape underground. He thought that the ugly worms were strong and aggressive demonic beasts, and they provoked him enough. When I was looking into the abyss, I felt something approaching very quickly behind me. He turned around and shouted that the monster was behind him and was approaching quickly. And then he changed his trajectory and quickly crawled toward Minya. Aaron hurried to take her away because he saw that the girl was confused and did not move. They jumped to the side just before the worm popped out of the ground. At the same time, the creature threw a flag in the air that marked the mine with the mine itself. Minnie nervously looked at her watch as she was about to explode in a second. There was an explosion, and a fireball with the creature's blood flew in all directions. Lee Jingsing called it incredible because they managed to get such a weapon with a healthy explosive force. Sanwoo immediately jumped into the air, grabbed his sword, and charged at the monster. His sword entered one of the joints of the worm, piercing it in the middle. But there was one problem. He was still moving and heading towards the pit from which he had climbed even without his head. Lee Jingsing ran to him and shouted for him to let go of the sword because it was becoming very dangerous. Sanwoo understood what he meant, but he could not do it because the creature would disappear. As soon as most of the worm's body was in the pit, it quickly began to fall down. Only the tip of the creature remained in the air, and although the leader of Code Blue ran as fast as he could to help, he didn't make it. Sanwoo was descending rapidly, holding his sword, and the worm was trying to crawl as low as possible. He realized that his body was covered with wounds, so these were the last movements before the end, but at this rate, he would soon go to the next world. In order to somehow try to get out of this situation, I tried to build up my strength. This made it possible to wrestle the sword away and inflict a large number of cuts with quick movements. Meanwhile, on the surface, Lee Jingsing tried to dig his hands into the sand beneath him, and he shouted to Minya and Aaron why they were standing there and watching. He needed to help him finish off the creature. Quan Sena remarked to the leader that they were only children and did not have enhanced abilities, and he immediately apologized because he was angry. Tai was still worried that if the monster pulled him deep enough, he would suffocate, and they would have little time to help him. He ordered everyone to dig as deep as they could in the places where the worm moved because the ground was softer there. Suddenly, Minnie noticed a pile of earth a little further away from them, with a hand sticking out of it. Li Jingxing immediately ran to him and put his hand out in front to help him out. And to make it faster, I activated the ability by catching him well and pulling him up. Sunwoo immediately fell to his knees and started coughing because he had a lot of earth in his mouth. I also realized that at the moment when I was collecting energy, some unknown skill was activated, and if it wasn't for him, he would most likely not be alive. Even with its activation, I felt a strange pulsation through my body that I hadn't experienced before. While I was walking away from the fight, I didn't even notice how a girl from the other team came up behind me and slapped him on the back. I was angry with him because he didn't want to die already, and why the hell did he make everyone worry about him? He apologized to her, but took the policy out of his pocket to show her. He took out a large green kernel that drew their eyes to it. But the leader of Code Blue slapped himself in the face because how could he risk his life for the core of a 13th ranked beast? Aaron was outraged because it seems that they are facing a great hunter who has a lot of cores, but they need to restore the supplies they have spent today. Li Jianxing was not going to tolerate it either, shouting that it was good that they use such weapons, but they should choose a demonic beast of their own caliber. At this rate, they would simply die during one of these training sessions, and he even asked where they got such strange artifacts. Sanwoo tried to think of something, but Minnie raised her hand from behind her back and admitted that she was a magical technologist. This surprised and reassured him at once, and he immediately asked her name, and she replied that she was Minnie. Sanwoo warned that he did not want anyone else to know that they had a magical technologist. Scratching his beard, I realized that Nod would not sit idly by, as such abilities are very rare. Then it was Aaron's turn, and he was excited to be introduced to them. But Li Jingxing treated him coldly because he was still a little angry about his knife to his throat. But he was more interested in finding out what skills Sanwoo had as a leader, because his skill is very similar to that of Chang Su, and this raised the question of whether he learned it from him. He was surprised that he thought he had copied and adopted all the skills of Chang Su, but then he used lower body strengthening. And I hadn't seen this skill yet, which was strange because there were several unrelated skills that seemed as if he couldn't really show them to the end. Sina asked if it was possible to have several skills, and the leader replied yes, if they were similar to each other and he had never heard of so many in the body. Sanwoo did not know what words to use, and he was interrupted when the ground suddenly began to shake under his feet. This vibration meant that another ugly worm had appeared and was rapidly approaching them. It must be that this monster is from the same egg as the first one, and it must also be finished. Li Jingxing asked him what he was going to do in his condition, as he had not yet recovered from that battle. Sanwoo then smiled and said that they would not refuse and would gratefully accept help from their Sanbi. They gladly accepted this, and now they could show the hunt free of difficulty. Turning his head to the girl, he noticed that she was not a combat member of the team. Only two men jumped out in front to meet the rapidly approaching enemy. The worm jumped out of the ground right in front of them, and they managed to jump to the sides. Aran, shielding Minnie, noticed that the monster in front of them was bigger than the one they had fought. Sanwoo noticed that the monster was about to dive to attack, but since he was now without his shield, they could try to attack first. Li Jingxing shouted to his friend that the worm was going to crawl back and he needed to stop it. Svensik shouted, swinging his sword, and it immediately turned a light blue color. Then he shouted out the Sword of Moonlight, swung it, and the energy from it flew straight into the monster. The blow was so powerful that the monster's blood splashed around, and it stopped its movement. The Posier team stood there looking at it, and they all had different guesses as to what it could be. Sanwoo didn't have time to see it because it happened in a second, but he thought it looked like a skill he used. Neither the energy of the sword of the leader Li Jingxing, nor his unknown energy was caused by the core inserted into the sword. Most likely, they had just seen the power that came from the very purpose of man. Minnie saw that the monster started to run away, so she shouted to them to pay attention. But the two of them quickly mobilized and plunged their swords into both sides of the creature. Li Jianxing shouted to Heng to hold him tight and not let go. The monster began to move, causing the swords to cut through its body. It was then that the leader noticed that they had stuck their swords in the core section and shouted to pick them up. They both put a lot of effort and strength into it, and it resulted in the monster being pulled to the ground. And on cue, they made a jerk together that threw the ugly worm over them. The leader took a fighting stance, but this time his sword glowed red. Although the first word was Svensik, the command was the second, namely the explosive sword. The energy that escaped from him hit a part of the monster and tore that place into small pieces. When Sanwoo saw this, he was immediately nervous because this man's abilities were on a completely different level. Li Jianxing raised his thumb up, closed his eye, smiled, and asked if they had seen what real hunting was like. As he stood there smiling at them, the monster's head began to grow larger and larger, until blood and mucus came out of her and flew straight at him. Since he didn't see it, it all came crashing down on his head, and he didn't even step aside from the suddenness. At the same time, there were many similar but small worms in that mixture that quickly attacked him. Aaron and Sanvu quickly rushed to the rescue because these worm parasites were dangerous due to their number. Li Jianxing was writhing in pain and screaming for them to help him get off him as soon as possible. It seemed strange that he managed to destroy this worm like a true professional, but he didn't think he would make such a stupid rookie mistake. Since almost all hunters, especially those of his caliber, know that before killing an ugly worm, you need to get rid of its parasite. I also saw a strange thing and shouted to his team why they were standing there watching. Hen made a face and immediately said that he didn't like the little bugs. Sanwu looked at him and said, "I'm sorry," because he didn't understand what he had just heard. Li Jianxing raised a trembling hand and shouted out the name of Sina, who was sitting on the hood of the car. He could barely speak and mumbled that the time had come, but the girl did not understand. Almost crying, he shouted that he would leave them all to her if only she would help him, but she didn't want to believe his words. So the leader added that he would double the number of special dinners. He was already screaming to stop behaving like that because he felt that his strength was beginning to leave him. And then he promised her that she would get a bonus on her next mission in addition to double lunches. Quan Sena looked up at him, smiled, and said that she could take it back. Then she asked the handsome men to move to the sides as they would only interfere with her. She closed her eyes, raised her hands, and then a strange energy formed over them. The energy was directed to the leader's body, and it began to burn with a curious flame. Sanvu watched as the parasites disappeared, and he recovered, and could not believe his eyes that he was seeing a man with healing abilities in the desert. What was even more surprising was that she could use her powers from a distance. After finishing her work, she smiled again and asked Li Jianxing if he was feeling better. He stood up as if nothing had happened, although Sanwu's face showed that he was puzzled. I immediately asked him if he was okay, and he replied that it hurt a little bit, as it looked from the outside. Unable to stand it any longer, I asked Li Jianxing what had just happened here. The leader held up 2 fingers and boasted that this was an original story he created with Kwang Sung in the lead role. To understand everything correctly, I stopped him and asked if the whole scene was already written. He replied that it was correct, that this scene had been planned from the very beginning of the appearance of the ugly worm. And I almost ended up with a bad result because of Sina's unexpected improvisation, although it turned out even more impressive because of it. When everything was cleared up, Sanwu now asked what kind of attack he had used with the sword. His question caught the leader in an uncomfortable position, as if he knew nothing about core energy. Shaking his head to the side, he muttered that they had a long way to go. But he asked them not to worry, even though everything did not go according to plan, and they all passed thinking that now they deserved to be called their mentors. Li Jinxing began by first explaining the theory that Sana would help him with, because there is no one who can beat Sina in controlling the energy of the core. Sanvu immediately asked if he could teach Aaron and Minnie this. The leader explained that since the boy was not a meta person, such training would be useless for him, and it was too early for a magical engineer to learn such. But if he wants to take part in battles, he needs basic melee skills. Since this is Hen's specialty, he will be the one to train them in close combat. Aaron felt immediately what kind of training method it was. Hen was a harsh teacher, and even before he had recovered from the sparring, he ordered him to fight again. While they were occupied, we could start the lesson with basic knowledge. So I asked if he had heard that people were divided into categories. Sanvu knew that they were broken down into 6 categories: physical enhancements, extraordinary powers, magic, magic technology, psychopathy, and taming evil. Li Jinxing explained that these are the most common categories of people's goals, also called intrinsic traits. The core energy that each person has varies according to their unique characteristic. So, some people will get physical enhancements, and others will get fire skills. Sanwu asked him to explain it more openly to understand what he was getting at. He did, but stretching out his hand to him, he showed a strange glowing ball in his hand. He added that if it does not go through this transformation, it will not be able to release a particle of the nucleus, which is what they call a common feature. This also applies to his Moonlight Sword, an explosive sword. He collects some of the energy in the sword and then releases it. Sanwu immediately recognized that such commonalities were incredible. And that's not all. There's another reason why the general traits are important, because they directly influence the growth of his core energy. If you know how to use common features, you can significantly increase the amount of energy. Sina has taken the initiative. When people talk about growth, they usually think about improving skills, but the core itself can grow thanks to these traits. Sanvu wondered if this meant that he could combine the energy of all the abilities he had received, and if it continues to absorb abilities, it will be able to grow 2 or 3 times faster, if not more. The leader wanted to end the talks and move on to practice, telling them to concentrate and drive the car anywhere with all their might. Gaining strength in the fist, the blow instantly crushed the iron under it. Li Zhensheng looked at the door and said that the blow was not bad, but he did not expect it. He returned to Senna and asked her to jump out of the car because he wanted her to demonstrate something. When they moved back a bit, she asked the commander whether it was worth trying from this distance to begin with. She apologized to Sanwu for being confused, but she needed to find out from him. I could feel the energy in my hand when I hit the car, but she asked me not to think of it as muscle strength this time. Instead, to think of the movement of her fingers. Of course, she understood that it was difficult at first, and suggested that I first gather a little energy on my fingertips and then release it with a pinch. Sanwu folded his fingers and began to concentrate the energy in them, and then tried to snap them. The energy flew like a bullet past Li Jingxin and crashed into the car. From the expression on his face, one could immediately understand that the man was not expecting this at all. They both ran to the car, not believing there was a hole, and he managed to do it the first time. Sanwu approached them and asked if he had done everything right this time. But Sina also had questions for him, so she asked him if he had really managed to feel the flow of energy, and he answered that he had. Li Zhongxin asked to listen. Of course, Kim Busik will be angry about this, but he should seriously consider going to Noda's headquarters. Although I despise them myself, the training program there was really incredible. In fact, it would be better for him to stay here in Zone 17, but if personal growth is important to him, we should consider this possibility. Sanwu asked why the branch manager should have been angry with Li Jingxing, who replied that they both despised the main manager. These words made me think that the two of them despised the main leadership of the organization. Li Jingxing added that he said this because he is a manager's man, so he asked him to be more careful when talking to strangers. After the training, some time passed, and Sanwu stood in front of the destroyed bridge, looking at the column in front of him. He closed his eyes and began to accumulate energy inside himself. Then he opened his eyes, looked at the target, shouted Svensik's Sword of Moonlight, and made a movement that caused the energy to burst out of him. The energy passed through the column like a knife through butter, dividing it into 2 parts. But that wasn't all. He shouted out Svensik's explosive sword and a force of red flew after him. When the dust settled, it was clear that the explosion had shattered the top of the column into small pieces. After finishing the workout, I went to the office and looked around the room. When he didn't see Aaron, he asked the minion where he had gone and why he wasn't with her. Minnie explained that Aaron has been acting strange lately, even telling her to go without him except when they are training, and she doesn't know what he is doing. Sanwu asked if he could find a friend for Minnie, because with his temperament, she was afraid he would get into trouble. Suddenly, a sound from the door caught their attention, and they thought that the guy was listening in. But when I came out, I saw that there was absolutely no one in the corridor. As soon as I was about to go inside, I saw a note on the door. What Sanwu wrote there immediately made him tense and worried. Meanwhile, Aaron was tied up in a room surrounded by people. A man was sitting in the chair behind him and was asked if he thought he would come for him, and he replied that if he did not want to lose his friend, he would come as a cutie. Janie brought Sanva to the place where the note said. He thanked her and told her that she could go because he could handle the rest. When I entered the room, I stopped in front of the entrance to let my eyes get used to the darkness. And when they got used to it, they saw that at the other end was a group of people with Aaron tied up. Sanwu was shocked by the sight and shouted to him to see if he was okay. Then he shouted at the men what they were doing, but they also told him who he was to be rude to them. Their boss asked them not to interfere and asked if he remembered how he treated his wife, but it was too long ago to not remember. This made everyone worried about what to do with him, but this boy showed up here himself, which was just in time. Sanwu immediately asked that if this was the reason why they had called him here, they should let the child go. Kang Hyunsu got up and walked toward him, as it was hard to watch such a scene without crying. When he got close enough, he waved his hand and hit me in the face with his palm. And then he said he didn't understand what he had gotten himself into and how he dared to raise his head so confidently. How can someone like him, who is not able to look after himself, take care of someone else? Aaron, who had the sticker removed from his mouth, shouted loudly from behind him that it was enough. Kang Hensu immediately reacted with a powerful kick to the guy's torso. Because what makes him think he has the right to interfere in adult conversations? Sanwu stood up and shouted angrily at him to stop touching the child. At this, I turned my head in his direction and spat saliva out of my mouth. She flew past with her head to the side and landed on the ground. Looking at it, I saw smoke coming out of it as if it were acid or poison. It was not like his ability, so most likely he was hiding such a weapon in his mouth. Suddenly, a voice inside sounded to destroy him and asked why he was hiding his power. He doesn't want to let this garbage get away with such behavior, so that no one else will bother him. And when he swung to strike Manhwa, he managed to easily intercept his blow. Of course, Kang Hyun-soo did not immediately understand how such a weakling managed to block the blow. Squeezing his hand harder, he asked him to stop behaving like that and give Aaron back. But he only shouted that he was a guide and wanted to meet the end at his hands, not that he had already forgotten his place, because the branch manager was covering up with yoga. Of course, to stop this conversation, Sunwoo squeezed his fingers even harder and made a fist. Kang Hyun-soo closed his mouth as pain began to spread through his arm. At that moment, Sunwoo agreed with his inner goiter voice to make an example of this hunter. But he was immediately knocked down by Aaron, who hit his head on his stomach. He looked at him and told him to come to his senses and not to do it. While they were looking at each other, Kang Hyun-soo took advantage of the situation and ripped out his arm. After that, he was hit in the face with a powerful right fist. Sunwoo managed to stay on his feet, but froze in place as if thinking about something. And he turned to the man, bowed his head, and asked him to forgive him and to ask for his forgiveness. Kang Hyun-soo said that his wife did not say anything specific, but if they behave well and are careful in the future, everything will be fine. He also added that the younger one also needs to be more careful in the future to avoid getting into such situations. People couldn't believe that their boss was going to let these two go unpunished so easily. Sunwoo thanked him and said they were leaving, took Aaron and led him to the exit. The subordinates ran up to the boss and shouted that this was no way to teach them a lesson. Unable to stand the shouting, Kang Hyun-soo shouted at them to shut up. I realized that if the kid hadn't stopped him, his arm would have been crushed, and he was just a guide. The strength was incredible. Sunwoo untied Aaron and thanked him for his good work, for if he had not stopped him, he would have done bad things. After that almost happened, I couldn't look the manager in the eye anymore. Aruna said that he taught him that a guide should make rational decisions in all kinds of situations and put the lesson into practice. Sunwoo asked how he was captured by those guys, and the boy turned around and said that he was walking here and there and came to the neighborhood of the shelter. According to him, it turned out that he was just walking around collecting information about the surrounding area. Aaron said that it didn't matter what he did, because he was the only person in the Posier team, and he had to be useful in order not to get kicked out of the team. Sunwoo asked me not to put my life on the line from now on, but to develop my skills. But he had his own opinion, because a person like him doesn't need ballast. And after they met the blue code, he realized his place. I also realized that he really had no unique powers. And before Minnie could start looking down on him, he needed to be a good guide. Sunwoo denied that not all meta people look down on people without ability, but Aaron did not understand how he was saying this, because ordinary people are inferior, and this order was created by Nod himself. He looked at him and thought, because Aaron did not know that he was also ordinary, but he had already forgotten who he was. And from the words about Anyad, I remembered that Li Jingsheng emphasized not to trust anyone in the organization, as not everything is what it seemed. When we returned to the office together, I asked Minya where the branch manager was. She said that he had just left Jamie's, but she didn't know where exactly. She noticed Aaron's battered face and immediately asked Sunwoo to clean him up. And now we had to wait for Kim Busik's manager to talk to him to get rid of Kang Hyun-soo. While we were talking to each other, I didn't even notice that Hunter Hen was sitting in the chair next. He asked him if they hadn't gone on a mission and where the Hunter Jensen and Sina were. And then the embarrassed Hunter said that something had happened, so he would forgive him for helping. Sunwoo asked him to calm down and explain everything in a way that he could understand. Heng turned his head to the side and began by saying that their leader was attacked. This start was surprising because Li Jingsheng was at least a 7th-ranked mystery as to how he could have been attacked. Hen continued to tell us that not long ago they received an assignment from the branch manager. The essence of the task was to find and destroy the killers with one word: hunting. When he heard this, he understood what it was all about, since he had been offered it before. Kim Busik gave a letter with a task explaining that there was a hunt for murderers. In the task, the ratio between meta people and ordinary people was very large, and the manager explained that it was members of the attacking forces who started the uprising. The commander of the attacking detachment of the 14th zone fought against his subordinates, destroyed them, and then raised an uprising in which he also killed everyone. It was strange why it started, and the task seemed suspicious because there was no information about the organizer and the reason for the uprising. Sunwoo expressed doubts because of the lack of information, and considered it a problem to oppose the 3 meta people because nothing was said about their ability. Also, the task seemed very dangerous because the team lacked experience, so I refused it. The manager agreed that fighting with meta people with a desire to earn experience is as pointless as putting the cart before the horse. It was immediately apparent to Xiangwu that Kim Busik knew the real reason why he wanted the assassin hunting assignment. He also said that this task was very disturbing because it was very suspicious, but the manager listened and decided that he would give it to someone else. Although I agreed with him that there were a lot of dark spots in him, he asked me to forget about everything they had just talked about. It was also alarming that the manager himself also considered him to be somehow different, but who would have thought that he would be given to the team code blue? Sanwoo looked at Han and calmly asked what happened next to them. They were given the task 4 days ago and immediately started to fulfill it. When they got to the designated place, Hen walked in front and the two of them in the back. Sina asked the leader that it looked like he knew the commander Maiden who was killed. And that's how they met at Noda's training center. He was a kind, decent, and experienced man. No one had heard of him because he was part of a secretive attacking team like them, only in the 14th zone. Sina understood that the leader had been thrown out of the training center because of problems, but why, according to him, such a good man also ended up in the desert. But when she looked at Li Jingxin, she realized that he didn't want to talk about it. Then I picked up the task and asked if the description was too short, because there was almost no information about the people's goals. He explained that the 14th zone was behind it. They had already sent their people, but they were defeated, so the task was transferred to them. If they also fail, she will have to announce a public investigation and thinks that they will keep their mouths shut about the people's goals to the last. The reason is the same as why Kim Busiek keeps their identities secret, because the headquarters will find out that he was assembling an attack squad. Senna became aware of this because the regional authorities were afraid to announce the betrayal. That's right, because Nod forbade organizing a secret military force. Their conversation was interrupted by Hyun gesturing for them to stop. He got down on one knee to examine the ground more closely because he spotted the killer's footprint. Li Jingxing proposed to move on to where it was possible to conduct reconnaissance. Looking around, he pointed to a tall building, thinking that it offered a good view. They were there for 4 days, and the killer never showed up. As soon as Senna started to emphasize that they had been gone for a long time, she began to complain. They climbed up on the roof again to watch the streets. And then, while inspecting one of the streets with binoculars, the killer finally appeared. Li Zhenxing, in order not to delay and not to let the criminal in, ordered them to go down quickly. Later, the hiding men decided to follow him to lead them directly to the lair. You can also study them and wait for the right time, because if it's a patrol, they will be at least medium rank. When the person under surveillance turned into one of the houses, it was a chance to attack. He was immediately thrown to the floor and lost consciousness after being hit in the head. And when I woke up, I was tied to a chair with 2 people standing in front of me. Heng stood behind the wall on guard, while the rest of the team interrogated. Li Zhenxing showed him his little knife, emphasizing that if he suddenly screams or does something, he will use it. The first and quite logical question was where exactly their hiding place was, but the man followed up by asking if they were from the Noda headquarters. Because he was evading the question, it turned out that his lair was here, so the second question would be why he betrayed Maiden. Because the man mentioned this name, he guessed that they were not from the main headquarters, but asked where they were from. Li Jingxing saw no point in hiding, so he said they were from the 17th zone. The man realized that they had been sent by Kim Busik. Of course, the fact that he knew the name of the branch manager raised suspicion. Then he asked who they were and what they knew because they were asking stupid questions. Slapping himself on the head, Li Jingxing was indignant because he hadn't met such an impudent person who didn't know his place for a long time. Then the man's eyes shone purple and everything became a blur. Before Li Jingxing could even ask a question, his eyes turned that color. Asina saw that something was wrong, and shaking the leader asked him in a quiet voice if he was okay. Because of this question, Hen looked like he thought something had happened to them. And I saw that their leader's eyes changed and he was approaching her, so I shouted to run away. Since she did not understand the situation, she turned her head back and felt the knife enter her stomach. Heng explained that he did not see it because he was protecting the entrance, and when he turned around, he saw the leader's eyes. They looked lifeless and unfocused, and they also gave off a strange glow. Sanvu focused on what he meant by the strange glow he saw. When I answered yes, I meant exactly that, and a strange feeling appeared that I hadn't had before. It was confusing that he didn't even manage to see Li Jingxing attack him. Only thanks to good reflexes did he manage to put up a block and stop the kick. However, the head was not going to stop. He struck the floor with his sword, which caused a wave to go out and throw Hen away. He then shouted at him in the hope that it would come to that if he continued to behave like this, he would have to fight seriously. And yet, he took 2 swords from his back, released his strength, and took a position. Although I knew perfectly well that if the leader used cores in the battle, he would not have a chance, but he would definitely not lose in technology. I decided to try to attack and jumped up to the top to attack the leader from the ceiling. Although Li Jingxing was not himself, he remained as strong as ever. He managed not only to block the shot from the top, but also to take the initiative into his own hands and attack. Despite the reinforcements, Heng held on with all his might when the leader put pressure on him. Then I realized that I was wrong when I decided that he would be slow because of mind control. Grabbing the swords well, he pulled them forward and threw them aside. Then he shifted his weight to his left leg to swing his right leg hard for a punch. But he managed to intercept it, grabbed hold of it tightly, and lifted him into the air. He threw him into the wall, which collapsed on impact, and Hen flew out into the street. As soon as he stood up, he saw Li Zhenxing come to the edge and look at him. As soon as he was about to step down, Sina came up and grabbed the leader's hand, begging him to come to his senses. Lifeless eyes looked at her while a hand raised a sword above her head. Suddenly, a voice behind me ordered me to stop, and the leader's hand froze. The man said that healers were very rare, so we had to capture her. Sina looked at him in disbelief when he managed to get rid of the rope. But because the leader hit her neck, she lost consciousness and fell into his arm. The man walked to the edge of the hole and looked at the circle and saw that there was no other one. After this story, Aaron was disappointed because his comrades were brainwashed and kidnapped, and he just ran away. Sanwoo said that he was wrong, because Hyun did a great job of escaping from the puppeteer, just as he would have done if he had been taken over as well. The goal of people with psychopathic abilities is to take control of people. The guy immediately had a logical question about what the commander would do now, what he heard, and what he thought. Aaron expressed that the head of that team pissed him off, but he helped them with their training, and they felt like they were the only team with them. Sanwoo again remarked that he was wrong, as the guide should put the safety of his team first. In order to save a colleague who is in danger, according to him, others would have to be put in danger, so there would be no one left in his team. After this little lesson, he expressed his opinion that he also believes they should save Code Blue. Both the leader Jensen and the hunter Sina are talented meta people, and if they are both under control, they will become a serious threat in the future. Even though they came to the same conclusion, he should foresee all the consequences and think ahead, which is exactly what a good guide should be. In any case, they should not be invited to officially support them, as this would be highly likely to reveal the existence of covert teams. He ordered Aaron to get ready and brief Minya, as they would be leaving tomorrow at dawn. He himself recalled a conversation with the manager because he told him it was up to him to act, whether to keep the hidden team secret or to endanger his team members. The next morning they went out, and Hen led them to that abandoned place. On the way, he noticed that Aaron was carrying a strange box on his back, so he asked what it was, to which he smiled and boasted that it was hard to get it, and everyone will know later when they see it. Walking behind, Sanwoo was covering the rear and looked worried all the way, as he recalled training with Li Zhenxing when he tried to teach him his techniques. However, he was annoyed that after making many attempts, nothing came of it. Li Jingxing realized that it was not just encouragement to not give up and try again. For an illustrative example, I decided to show it to Sensik and shouted out the Moonlight Sword. The energy strike went straight through the square stone, leaving a smooth cut. Sunwoo called it incredible, and Li Jensing smiled and asked if he knew what the difference was. But he replied that he did not, except for shouting out inane attack commands. He immediately laughed, because that was not the only thing he could see after such a steep blow. Sanwoo interrupted him, because they don't really need to shout out every time. After all, they're not in a game or a manhwa about the post-apocalypse. Li Zhenxing pointed his finger to draw attention to himself and asked if he had heard anything about verbal commands. For battles with high-ranking demonic beasts, you need to think of the core as an extension of your body. But in emergency situations, it is almost impossible to feel the movement of the core and use its energy correctly. That's why you first need to decide on the method of using the kernel, and only then give this method a name. And every time you use the skill, you need to shout out this name, and after many repetitions, you will instinctively start shouting out the names of attack. To begin with, if you can't do it out loud, you can try to name the process of using the sword in your head, then you need to swing the sword while shouting Svensik. Sanwoo agreed to this alternative and closed his eyes to feel the flow of the core. Channeling the energy into the sword, he swung it while shouting Svensik the Crescent Sword. The energy flew into the second part of the column that remained after Jensen's attack. And then there was a laugh. The leader was laughing because he couldn't hear him, and it was clear why he had been reluctant to do this for so long. After calming down, he clapped me on the shoulder and praised me for doing a great job. Experienced people said that if you connect your skills in your head, teams will appear by themselves. Although I did not reach this level myself, looking at him, I could think that I might be able to reach it. Sanwoo concluded that having spent years collecting information as a guide, he learned a lot from Li Jingxing in just a week. He needed it to continue to develop, but he didn't want to even think that the killers could catch him at that moment, and Hen emphasized that they had come. They immediately went to the place where Heng fought with Li Jianxing. Aaron examined the place and concluded that they had left because their hiding place had been found. Poking with a stick at the him, Hen complained that the footprints were like finding them, but not specific. Aaron asked to give him the stick he was holding. When I handed it over, the guy almost went crazy from the foul smell. Then he leaned over to the box and started poking around with that stick. He gave this stick to the strange creature so that the animal could smell it. By the violent reaction, Aaron realized that the creature had heard his target. Sanwoo asked the two of them to move further away from the box. Gathering the energy in my fingers, I snapped them, and it flew into the box. The box collapsed, and a small rat-like animal froze in place. Hen was afraid, and Aaron warned him that he shouldn't do anything, that it was just a 20th ranked striped rat and that he shouldn't be so scared. Then Sanwoo interjected, saying that Hunter Hyun would go with him on the trail first, and Aaron and the minis will follow them slowly to avoid danger. The rat suddenly spun around and started running fast in some direction. Sanwoo realized that the animal had smelled the trail and rushed to catch up with it because it could not be lost. Despite their small size, the two of them struggled to keep up with her. The rat stopped in front of the entrance to one of the buildings to sniff out the right trail, indicating that they had arrived. At first glance, it was too quiet, and Hen even thought they had found the wrong place. But Sanwoo did not support this, because he knew that a black striped rat never loses its prey. This demonic beast is also used for tracking because it has an incredible sense of smell. Hen then assumed that the enemies had heard them and were hiding, so they decided to split up here so quietly. Sunwoo went to the entrance that was on the side of the building, entering through one hole and looking around. Once inside, he moved carefully, trying not to make noise and taking his time, until I heard Hen's voice shouting his name very loudly, and then I ran to him as fast as I could. When I ran to him, I was frozen by the picture before his eyes. A group of people were lying around the room, looking like they were fighting a demon. Sanwoo moved cautiously between the remains of the people, looking around. He turned his head to Hen and said that the chairman and Sina were not among them. I also asked him if he could confirm that these were the same people who were killed in the uprising. I confirmed with full confidence because I remembered their characteristics from the photo at the briefing. Sanva wondered if he had met the puppeteer before, if his body was among the others. It was hard to answer because they seemed to have been attacked and torn apart by a demonic beast, but I am sure that there is no puppeteer here. Sanvu determined that it was not an animal attack because the footprints were too clean, and they had acted without a doubt with first-class skill. Hen asked who could have done this, and he told him that he didn't know for sure, but that the target was most likely a high-ranking person. And they also need to be more careful not to be in the shoes of these people. Sanwu saw that he was looking for something and asked him about it. Hyun explained that he was looking for a blonde among the dead. Since being honest, along with the task of hunting down the killers, the branch manager assigned something else. If during the task they find a target person named Lexi, they need to bring her alive. But because of the puppeteer, I didn't see the point in telling them about it. Sunwoo thought that not only are different zones playing a double game with the help of hidden groups, but the manager is also asking to bring in an unknown target. Since they had already finished here, Hen asked what they would do next. Without hesitation, he replied that the puppeteer had fled, deciding that he could not cope with the new pursuers, but since the blood was fresh, he should not have gone far. As soon as Aaron and Minnie arrive, they will immediately check all the suspicious places. They climbed up on the building of one of the houses with a good view. Minnie noticed the subway, and Hen called it suspicious because if it's deep, it's probably teeming with demonic beasts. Aaron intercepted the thought because no human footprints would be normal, but at the entrance, they saw human footprints, and that was already suspicious. Sanwoo confirmed that it was true. This place where the pursuers would not go is both dangerous and safe despite the chase. The puppeteer thinks well. Hen went behind his back to get the swords, because if it was true, he had to check. Aaron stopped him, because first he needed to determine how many people were there and who they were, and he needed to be patient despite the dust. From the side, Sanwoo agreed, but added that if they couldn't get in, they needed to lure him out. He turned his head to Minia and told her to get it. The girl was beaming with happiness because she finally had the opportunity to use a grenade launcher. Aaron liked the fact that by firing it, someone is likely to come out when they hear a noise. Minnie emphasized, warning that if she had an ordinary magic projectile in her hand, she would have agreed with him. But the charge she created will react to her signal and break into a large number of magical projectiles that will fly around, so they can't hide from the explosion. Putting his hand on Sanvu's shoulder, He asked her to shoot. The missile immediately flew out of the grenade launcher and headed for the target. After the explosion in the subway, Minnie made a fist and shouted that the explosion was art. Sanwoo looked at her because there was a rather strange expression, thinking even that it might have been her verbal command. Now it was time for him and Hunter Hen to take out their weapons and hurry inside. As they approached the dungeon, they saw a person coming out of it. Covering his eyes with his hands, he shouted what was happening here. Hen was able to see and warn them that it was a puppeteer. The man heard this, although his eyes hurt, and he had to open them to protect himself. Ik-yun then shouted at Shangwoo not to look him in the eye. When he got close enough, he closed his eyes, swung his sword, and hit the puppeteer in the face. He immediately fell to his knees, blood streaming down his arms, and his voice screaming in pain, shouting what happened to his eyes. Sanwoo, already standing calmly to his side, struck his leg with the sharp end of his sword. He said that he neutralized his mind control abilities and cut the nerves in his leg to prevent him from escaping. He further ordered them to keep a close eye on him in his current state, and that should be enough. But if something starts to go crazy, you need to destroy it immediately. Until it can use its eyes, you need to find the rest. In order not to waste time, they grabbed their weapons and quickly ran to the subway. When we went down a little bit, we suddenly stopped because we noticed something in front of us. A man in a special suit and glasses came out and asked them who they were. I heard another voice behind me, followed by a girl in the same costume. She told her friend that the two had probably come here to save their friend. A third man came up and asked if they had left any traces, and now it became clear where the smoke and dust came from. Hen noticed someone on his shoulder and recognized her as Sen and shouted to her. His scream attracted the attention of the last member of the team, who was also holding a body on her back. I smiled when I saw that they were not murderers, but just kids from the 17th zone. Sanwoo looked at them and did not understand how they knew them or what was going on. Since it was the first time I saw them, I realized that it was too risky to start a fight with them, and I also saw that they had no chance against me. This meant that they had only one way out, and he hid his sword behind his back and apologized for his rudeness because they were on a mission from the 14th zone to catch the killers. And the hunters from the 17th zone are not sure at what level the error occurred, but their conflict arose due to the overlap of tasks. The red-haired woman who threw her body off reminded us that the rule says that one team is sent to one task. Of course, they have been working for a long time and realized that anything could happen. She thought he didn't look like a hunter, which was strange. Sanwoo did not understand whether they were provoking or really did not know, or of course they did not know because they were a secret team. But if they are aware of it, they want them to disclose themselves by telling them that they are not hiding anything from them and asking which zone they belong to. The man with glasses reacted angrily, pointing his fist and shouting that it was none of their business. He was understanding and offered to do so, since their comrade was unconscious, and if they handed her over to them, they would leave peacefully. The girl laughed behind him because he didn't seem to realize what position he was in. Everything was theirs from the beginning. Of course, for Sanwoo, this reaction meant that it would not be as easy as he thought. The red-haired woman took the floor, explaining once again that they were taking out the head of the assassins of the task and his companion. These conditions were very bad, but they needed to avoid conflict with them, and the question of what to do was still open. Suddenly, another voice came from the subway telling them to leave his friend and get out of here. Li Zhenxing, barely standing on his feet, leaning on his sword, told them to give Sina to him. The girl warned that everything had already been said, and that they were also guilty of sin, because they had sided with the murderers, so if they didn't want to get hurt, they shouldn't get involved. As soon as he whispered once again to recognize Sen, she picked up her sword and placed it on his shoulder. Suddenly, because of this, Hen rushed at the health worker, knocking him down. Sanwoo gritted his teeth because it was the worst-case scenario. Everything was spoiled for help in the battle over them requested help. Eren and Minya took out their weapons, aimed and fired at the enemies below, but the explosion did not hit them because they managed to stretch out their arms and put the defense in front of them. Sanwoo quickly assessed the situation and decided to defeat the man who could only use one arm. When he took one step toward the man, his leg was wrapped in a rope. The red-haired girl channeled her strength into it, threw it against the wall next to her. Smiling at him, she said how he only dared to try to attack. Sanwoo broke free and quickly mobilized for a counterattack. Directing the energy into the sword, Svenzik shouted out the sword crescent, but the girl quickly saw this and directed the rope toward him and managed to snatch the sword. She was also amused by what he shouted, thinking that this was not the name of his dog. Eren saw that he was in trouble and shouted that he would help him. He and Minya reloaded their weapons, took aim, and fired at them. However, It was in vain, as they again managed to surround themselves with a barrier, so the explosion missed them. The man began to wonder who they were that used cannonballs like soldiers. While the attack was being held back, she noticed that the guide had disappeared in the dust. Meanwhile, Sanwoo managed to get close to the man with the bandage to try to hit him. But he managed to see the sudden attack and quickly shifted his body weight back to dodge the blow. He shouted that if he really wanted to take her back, he could take her back. The hay flew at him, thus knocking down his attack. The enemy realized that in order to stop him, they needed to push even harder and advance further. It worked as Sanwoo was lying on the floor, and the man's hand was hovering threateningly over him. He said that he had listened to his request and returned the girl, but he saw that she was just ballast. Then I heard the voice of a girl shouting to her commander from above to hide. She loaded the grenade launcher with a special projectile and aimed it at them. And then she shouted that the explosion was art and pulled the trigger on the grenade launcher. Sanwoo managed to activate the defense, and a powerful explosion swept over him. The explosion went off outside and the recoil threw Minnie backward, and Aaron immediately ran after her. There was a lot of dust and debris around, but Sanwoo and Senna remained unharmed. The man and the girl were injured, but also managed to survive the explosion. The girl took off her broken glasses, commenting that the attack was dangerous and they almost died. Sanwoo was stunned and opened his mouth when he saw who the girl was. She straightened up, smiled, and greeted him, calling him a guide. It was the rude woman with red hair, who was the wife of the hunter Kang Hyun-soo. She noticed his reaction because it appeared that he recognized her only now. The girl put up the defense in time, as she saw that shells were flying at them again. She asked the children to stop shooting at them, wiping away the dust with her hand. But when the dust settled, they saw that Sanwoo and the girl's body had disappeared. He ran up the stairs, asking himself what was happening and why Shin Young-ha was with them. But he stopped himself right away because he changed his mind and didn't want to know. He just wanted them to stop harassing him. As soon as I thought that it was not likely to be difficult to fight with someone when you had to carry someone on your back, he was attacked by a man with a bandage. He swung his leg and kicked him in the stomach, knocking him down. And the blow was so strong that he managed to knock him down the stairs to the bottom. Then the man looked down at the children standing in front of the entrance. The two of them froze because they could see from his abilities that they could not win. Meanwhile, downstairs, Heng continued to battle with his health while the girl dealt with Lee Jensen. Just after the fall, Sanwoo managed to recover, looked up, and saw the leader's sword in front of him. Grabbing hold of it, Svensik stood up and shouted out the sword of the crescent moon. The girl looked at him calmly and asked him how long he would continue. On the side, Shin Young-ha also called for a stop. Her nagging question was whether the experienced guide hadn't already realized what was happening. I urged him to think about his situation and remember what he himself said, that in order to survive in the desert, you need to know what is happening around you. Before he started to fight, she thought he was smarter and wondered why he didn't want to surrender. After listening to her, I looked at her and wondered what she was really doing. Throwing the sword aside, he knelt down and raised his hands in the air, shouting that he was surrendering. Hen saw that he had surrendered, then threw away his weapon and knelt down, saying that he was also surrendering. They were joined by a man with a bandage holding the children on his back, who called it a wise decision. Sanwoo was alerted because he hadn't even noticed that he had been away and had managed to deal with them. Putting them side by side on the wall first, I had one question for him: why they attacked them. He replied that they only wanted to take their comrade, and as he said, would have made concessions if they had not attacked the leader. The man looked at Muktasfai and emphasized that if he saw that I was not strong enough, he should have insisted on singing, because if he wanted to, he would have killed everyone himself. Since he liked his attitude, he introduced himself as an inspection team from NODA's headquarters in South Korea. They were also sent to the 17th zone for inspection. Shin Young-ha explained that they were the true representatives of NOD, as he had always said, so it should not be surprising. Newcomers like him didn't even have a chance to meet anyone from the headquarters, and he added that he was the leader of the Ghosts team, Maeda Toshiro. Shin Young-ha introduced herself once again and then revealed that the guy was Jack Jr. and the girl was Lee Xianghua. After listening to Sanwa, he concluded that they were all spies. And it was true. She explained that their task was to study NODA's department. They were hiding an identity to investigate the 14th and 17th zone. In violation of NODA's rules, each department must register and report information about its target people. Sanwoo thought that was why his gut reacted the way it did when he took her hand. All zones are controlled by NOD, and he is seriously mistaken if he thinks that a simple branch can escape the gaze of the headquarters. The commander ordered her to put them to sleep until the headquarters decided to put them to sleep. Sanwoo yelled at her to stop, asking her to let the children go at least, but she apologized because it was problematic. Instead, she promised him that they would be safe and well treated. She told him not to worry and to go to sleep. Then he fell to the ground, closed his eyes, and instantly fell asleep. When he was sleeping, he dreamt that he was talking to Lee Jensing to stop him from believing Nod. Because they select talented children from the desert and train them and then demand that they drive out all the monsters, this was part of Nod's plan. Sanvu understood them with one exception, Belkis, who needs to be dealt with separately, and with his current strength he can kill all the monsters. Then, Li Jingxing explained that the organization believes that in dangerous conditions, more people will wake up, so they do not turn the desert into safe zones like cities. They do all this on purpose and then take these children and train them systematically. But if they continue to do this and hope that they can win in this way, everyone will die. Then the dream switched to where little Sanvu was hidden behind a pile of stone at night. It was then that a man came up and asked if he was Sanvu. He opened his mouth in surprise because he knew his name and even called him Dad. But the man said that his name was not his father, but Kim Busik, and that it took him some time to find him. Then he told me to follow him because he would make him the best guide in Nod. Since he had a long way to go, he extended his hand and offered to walk it together and reach heights that Nod had never dreamed of. Samva was moved to a room where he lay on the floor, bound hand and foot. When he woke up and saw the man in front of him, he apologized for leaving him in that state for so long. With one eye open, he looked at the man and did not understand who he was or where he was. The man smiled and apologized again, as it was a bit much to say, and introduced himself as Risky Lee, the interim chief of staff of Noda. Although this is not the most comfortable place, he asked me to understand. Sanva wondered what their plans were, and if they were already aiming to interrupt them, because he knew that Nod was punishing those who were against them, or why he was wearing a collar with a nuclear bomb around his. Everything was right. The man saw that he was a really experienced guide and said that this approach was necessary to maintain order in the desert. However, if you look at all the details, you might find yourself with a knight on a chessboard, and the problem was not the pure intention of the person moving the pieces. According to him, Sanwu realized that the branch manager would be punished, and he said that he had already been punished. The crime of creating personal combat groups by secretly recruiting meta people is not a light offense, so they finished clearing the zone. Sanvu was not worried about them destroying everyone from the 17th and 14th zone. Risky Lee turned a blind eye as he was not sure it was the jurisdiction of another department. If they suffered severe punishment, they may not have survived, but let's hope that's not the case. His situation was not simple, and his crimes were quite serious because he joined the anti-Novak forces of his own free will. Despite this, Li Jingxin was fired 4 days ago. Perhaps they did not see the point in this because they released him despite his serious crime. But the reason for the decision is that in the current state, the desert will sooner or later destroy him, and the headquarters does not have time to judge someone who has lost his awakened ability. Sanva even asked him again, and the man explained that the recovery was quite difficult because the puppeteer had been brainwashing him for quite a long time. It was hard to wrap my head around this information because how is it possible to have a manager and a team leader at the same times? Risky Lee went on to say that there was a reason he came to see him, despite the fact that he was an interim. From the very beginning, he held the position of instructor at the Noda Training Center, so I'm sure he got the idea. After the conversation, Sanva was released, handing the weapon back because of the darkness. When he went outside, the sun blinded his eyes. But he came too quickly because he heard someone shouting to him and saw Aaron running to meet him. He hugged me and looked at me as if he thought something bad had happened to him. The leader of the Primar team looked down at them and asked if they would go back. He was told that they could do nothing if they chose to stay in the desert, and the commander wondered if they were preparing something against them. Risky Lee answered this by asking whether a low-ranking person would be able to avoid his gaze and think of something. As they walked away, Aaron asked what happened to Minya and Senna and if he had heard from them at all. Sanwu said that the hunter Senna received treatment from Noda, and Minnie decided to stay with her for the time being. Looking at the two of them, I could see something in their behavior. Aaron did not receive an invitation from Instructor Lee, most likely because he does not have the ability. If that is the case, he will have to lie. He stopped and told them that they would have to split up here, but neither of them understood why. The reason was that he wanted him and Hunter Han to do something, namely find someone. Sanwu walked all day until he arrived at the stadium where Zone 17 was located. When I entered the office, I saw that the furniture was scattered and everything was covered in blood. He was angry because he had come prepared, but it was too late. Then he ran to the manager's office hoping that he was left alive. When I went inside, I was quite shocked by what I saw. The manager was lying on the couch, covered with a blanket, with blood stains on his side, and a bowl of red water, and Jamie standing next to him. I immediately went to my room and ran to the manager to ask him everything. But he barely opened his eyes and looked at him and said that he had already returned. Sunwoo apologized for leaving without saying a word to him, but Kim Busik reassured him that he was the one who had to apologize, but he couldn't even shake hands. When I lifted the blanket to see what the cause was, I could not believe my eyes. Jamie immediately turned her head in Sunwoo's direction, outraged that those bastards from Noda could do this to him. The manager was calm and explained that he had paid the price for going up against a huge organization. Sanvu could not stand it any longer, because if it was not already worth cutting off his arms and legs for this reason. Kim Busik said that this is not such a big price to pay, because so many people were killed in an attempt to save this modest existence that we should feel pity for that. Sanwoo openly asked the branch manager how he was not able to predict the future. Why did he then create a secret team and go against Nod? These words about predicting the future made me tell him something before it was too late. He turned his head to Jamie and asked her if she could leave them for a while. When she came out, he asked him to listen carefully to what he had to say, because his ability has nothing to do with foreseeing the future. It's really about his memory. But it's not just an improved memory. It's the reason why he remembers things that others don't. Humanity is already extinct. Sanvu stopped him immediately as he did not understand what he was talking. Kim Busik continued that he does not mean that this world is just a dream and they are just spirits. Or, rather, that somehow humanity has already died out. Sanwoo asked him to wait in confusion, as he was supposed to be a branch manager, and he said that it was an experience from his past life, his ability to remember everything that happened to him in his past lives. Then everything started to fall into place for Sanvu when the manager said that he had finally woken up, and the fact that I already knew the person I offered to join the team for one talented goal, even when I asked him directly about his ability to predict the future. Now, at last, all the logic has come together and everything has become clear. The manager agreed that the predictions were true because he had already been through this, especially the arrival of monsters and their location, which did not change. However, this time he recognized that these events were completely different. The more changes at the present, the more the future changes, and at some point this life will be completely different. I immediately remembered the words that if I had foresight, I would not have let Changs die. It turned out that the manager had exactly this in mind for the changes. He explained that he became a manager and took him to his place, although he was supposed to stay in the administrative center of Gwangmun, which could be the reason for his later awakening. Sanwoo was outraged that the future might have changed, but he had to understand that uniting people's goals to form combat groups would be considered a betrayal. Kim Busik knew he was responsible for this, but he couldn't help but rebel because he had to prove it was wrong. He emphasized that I should listen carefully now, because he will tell me what happened before he died last time. He understood little about past lives and regression, but rose to high positions because of his ability. Despite being busy, he lived a good life and did not even think about the desert. Because I wanted to believe that life in the city would be the same as before the cataclysm, but according to my memories, the events would take place in 5 years, namely the beginning of the destruction of humanity. Belkist, Malbus, Salios, 3 rarely seen creatures appeared at the same time and set their sights on this world. Nod could not stop them because of his greed and inaction. They were supposed to deal with the demonic beasts one by one at the moment of their appearance, but Nod perceived them as earthquakes and ignored their appearance. Drawn into a power struggle and blinded by their attempts to protect the targeted people, they brought disaster upon themselves. He died then, but was immediately reborn and began his journey from the beginning, along with memories of the events in Gwangmun and the names of active hunters. He doesn't know whether it was because of a desire to become a hero or a greedy desire to survive, but he was determined to stop the disaster. However, he could no longer trust Nod because they were absorbed in arguments until the disaster, which is why he teamed up with Beatrice. Even when she was little, he was able to get to her and ask if she could help him. Despite her youth, she was intelligent, and so they formed an alliance against Nodu, thus creating the 14th and 17th zone. The main goal of this plan was to prioritize the collection of the 9 keys before Nod did. The 9 keys is a team capable of defeating the demonic beasts with names. They were exceptional meta people whom he had seen in battle living a past life. Therefore, I planned to share the information with the keys and tell them about the location of those demonic beasts, so they would have plenty of time to defeat them. After harvesting, they would help the keys grow, with the original plan being to start the hunt 3 years later, but the problem was Noda. They didn't think twice, and a branch manager unrelated to them caught them organizing a hidden team. As a result, Nod increased surveillance, and they were caught. Recently, we found one of Lexi's keys and entrusted its development to the 14th zone. But there was a spy in the middle of the secret team, the so-called puppeteer. A man wanting to get Lexi, he manipulated the meta people, destroyed the commander of the strike team, and took the meta people with him. In this regard, Nod learned about Lexi and the existence of hidden commands. Sanwoo recalled that test, blaming himself for his stupidity. The manager said that everything that happened next was up to him. Whatever his path, he had to remember one thing. He would only have hope of winning if he reduced the number of monsters before the final battle. Sanwoo didn't understand one thing, so he asked the manager why it was him. And the manager said it was because he had an absorptive capacity with unlimited potential. His hands are shaking, and he's not counting on chance to get this far. At the word accident, the manager laughed and continued to explain that the final battle in the past life harms demonic beasts of rank S the most. But he was the one who defeated these creatures, possessing incredible strength. For he was the heart of the 9 keys, and I was wandering in the desert looking for him. A fragment of the memory of the first time they met popped up in Sanwoo's mind, just as he had dreamed recently. After listening to him to the end, I decided that if he puts all his hopes in it, he will accept it. But what exactly should be done? Kim Basik said that when their journey was about to come to an end, he was going to give him an ability that would unleash the full potential of his absorptive power. Sanwoo was immediately interested in what this ability was, but the manager asked him to get the box from under the table. He walked over to his desk, took out a box from under the table, and lifted the lid. The manager's knife was in it, so he asked if it was some kind of a joke. Laughing, he replied that he did not remember that he had just made it. He needed to absorb the ability about his past life is the best way they will win the last battle. The keys he found were Beatrice Sinalexi and Gewol, who was in an orphanage in Puchan. In total, he has 5 keys and needs to find the rest. As soon as the manager said to finish him off to get stronger, the voice in my head screamed to take away the power. Sanwoo clutched his head and asked me to stop. Now was not the time to talk to him. Then he asked the manager that if he didn't want to, he could try again with the help of the ability. But exhausted, Kim Busik asked in response if he wanted to go through this again, so he asked for mercy. Since he wanted to avoid the time loop, Sanwoo exposed the knife with trembling hands. I remembered how the manager made a sign when he first created the zone. How he used to run up to him as a little boy to brag about new skills or things, and he never turned away, smiling and encouraging him. When the knife was over his head, Sanwoo thanked Kim Busik for everything, and he closed his eyes and asked Sanwoo to take care of him. After he made his last request, the knife fell to the floor with blood on it. Sanwoo also fell to his knees because he had to step over himself to do it. And then the energy enveloped him. The tension went through his body, and the power passed to him. Then I felt that memories began to come to my mind, and they were from the manager's past life. But then he abruptly caught himself thinking that these were also memories from his past life. He lost consciousness from overloading his head with thoughts and fell to the floor. As soon as I came to, I sat down and froze in place, looking ahead. I didn't know whether he was in the Gwangmuan office or not, and remembered that this was a past life, so it must be in a branch office. Due to the fact that his memory was lost, he did not understand whether he was Kim Busik or Kim Seong-woo. But when I saw the body on the couch, and that it was a branch manager, my mind slowly fell into place. He raised his hands and realized, like a bolt of lightning, that he was Kim Seong-woo. He could barely hold back his tears as he looked at Kim Busik because he was too dear to him. Who knew that he was going to meet an unknown future with such painful memories in his head? The voice told him that it apologized for putting this on his shoulders and creating a sin against him. Sanwoo turned his head around the room because it was the manager's voice. But looking at the body, I realized that these were memories of strong emotions in the last moments of life. It would not be until the very end that he would be annoyed by its place in his memories, and he was honestly afraid that he would no longer be himself. But he will do his best, because he was the one who made the right choice. Before leaving, he bowed in front of the manager as a sign of respect. Looking for Jamie, he went outside because it seemed to have fallen through the ground. But there I saw a group of people catching her and holding her hostage. She said that these people suddenly wanted to meet with the manager. And then I heard a familiar voice, Kang Hensu, come out of the crowd and ask how he was doing. Sanwoo was in no mood to ask the hunter angrily what it all meant. He wondered where all the formalities had gone from their conversation. But this time, I was going to let it go because I was so busy, so I decided to get straight to the point and offered to work with them. Because I knew that Kim Busik was finished, and I also knew that he had been named as a traitor to Nod, so they decided to take control of the 17th zone and offer Nod a deal. After Kim Busik's suspension, He will make a new exchange center here. If they want to survive in the desert, they need a good guide. Sanwoo replied that his dream sounded unbelievable and unrealistic. Why would Nodu return something that had already been thrown away? These words hit where they should and made him angry, and he admitted that he was right and seemed unwilling to accept his offer. He offered to return the hostage if he helped defeat Kim Busik. Sanwoo praised her for doing a good job and told her to hide inside so she wouldn't get hurt. Kang Hensu said that if you look at it that way, he is ready to cooperate, and I really didn't think I was a fool to go to not empty-handed. Then his people took him out and put something covered with a cloth near him. People started to lift up a man, Kang Hensu, who shouted to take a good look. It was his ace, which he had to give to Nod as a good deal. Sanwoo was stunned when he saw the leader Li Jingxing tied up on the cross. Kang Hyunsu thought that he did not know this man because he was kept secret, and at first he was worried because he was a high-ranking officer, but they easily caught him. Since he was part of the main headquarters and turned against it, he became the worst offender. Sanwoo interrupted the hunter by laughing at him loudly and non-stop. He did not understand his reaction, why he was laughing, or whether he had gone crazy. After calming down, he said that neither the manager nor Lee Jensen were valuable to Nod, as Nod had already punished them. Kang Hensu bugged his eyes and asked how he knew about it, but his question was ignored. Sanwoo screamed as the hunters put their lives on the line in an attempt to save the center. They did disgusting things. Because of these words, he quickly grabbed Sanva by the jacket and shouted that he had forgotten his place. But suddenly the branch manager whispered, "Your sins are too deep if you hid this from him. I always thought that he could only absorb the abilities of those he destroyed, but it seems that this was not the case." Kang Hensu did not understand what was happening, why he was saying all these strange things. Sanwoo said that it was an accident, as it was a memory from his past life that popped up in his head. He grabbed his hands and said thank you for lunch. The power surrounded him, as if in the same way when he absorbed people's ability. Kang Hensu also lit up, raised his head up, and screamed in pain. The two of them stood facing each other, Sanwoo absorbing the hunter's strength into himself. He pushed him away, covered in sweat, held his hand, and asked what it was. Sanwoo honestly replied that it was nothing special, just a 15th ranked upgrade. He drew his sword because he realized that such tricks had awakened him, but he would show him how terrible the 15th ranked reinforcement was. Suddenly the sword pulled him down, and he fell to the ground with a thud. I looked at him frightened, not knowing what the hell was going on, as I have to do every day. In order not to be confused, Sanwoo said that he had lost his ability and was sure that it was difficult to lift the sword without reinforcement. The man stubbornly stood his ground, screamed, grabbed his sword with both hands and raised it above him. Suddenly, you could even see the muscle in his arm crack along with the joints. Sanwoo attacked him, calling him a fool because how could he not feel their pain? The punch of his right fist hit the hunter's jaw with such force that he was thrown. Falling down beside their men, they could not believe that the guide had managed to hit their boss like that. In revenge, they attacked Sanva while he was standing with his back to them. Their boss has already been defeated, but they still don't understand the situation and try to capture him. Since the attackers stopped and shouted what was this black aura that none of them had ever seen before. Sanwoo's eyes also glowed with a bright color, and he quietly spoke tentacle. Straight line. Although Sanwoo felt that it consumes too much energy, to the point where the energy it absorbs does not replenish the reserves. This skill is very costly for him now, as he cannot be himself in the present with the past. Kang Hen Sanwoo with one, if not, that's in the wiping. Then walking after he refused, the stranger showed him her card. She was very suddenly the girl Sanwoo she asked there could not out of Sanwoo as they got her they stood then we went the girl he said but it was not Beatrice this images still there was she was but he's how many after or when it is not enough for protection and when the time comes it will join the until Sanwoo in this she asked Beatrice to reassure Sanwoo the man Beatrice Sanwoo thanked her but told her that he did not believe in God. I asked her not to forget about sleep and if she kept losing consciousness how she was going to live to see day X. I remember as night hen caught, Sanwoo realized that he was in shock. The leader was his teacher, and he was living like a ghost in the middle of a hidden team with a certain harsh future in front of his eye. He asked what they both hen asked, and if Ian asked if it was because of Aaron and was told that he was not a meta person and could not join. But at the same time, he could not be left alone in the desert, and it was not about him. Because it was a Henrik, he came, it was night, Hen Sanvu, it was at, he raised in the morning, Hen at, despite Sanvu, but he knew Aaron at, he raised suddenly to calm, quite impressed, he eat Aaron because if they reacted in this way, shouldn't they check their defense in a polite manner? Aaron, but while Hang, who saw the attack first, managed to get his swords out of his back and shoot the arrows. Sanwoo shouted at Aaron to stop playing around and get to work as soon as possible, as it was starting to get annoying. His first target was upstairs, a guy in a shiny helmet. There was only the air. Sanwoo pointed his finger to the right because the next guy was a guy in ugly pants and he needed to aim between the legs. Aaron pulled the bowstring and smiled wickedly, saying that he might not hit on purpose. The arrow flew right between his legs, and because of the fright of the arrow, his hands broke. Taking out the next arrow, he asked Sanhwa if he could use it this time. He immediately remembered how Minnie had looked at this art in the same way and then shouted out a blast. Sanwoo allowed it, but there was one thing. No one was to be injured in the explosion. The arrow flew clearly between the first and second targets before the explosion, and it even seemed to be frozen in midair. After that, I was completely convinced that she and Minnie were almost identical. He exhaled, thinking that he was glad to have such a character on his side. The guards began to run away from the walls and shouted loudly that there were people here. Aaron was outraged because he was an ordinary person and not a meta-human, so Sanwoo pushed him forward to stop shouting and started walking. When they all jumped over the wall, they saw someone approaching them. A woman surrounded by guards approached them to start a dialogue with them. She immediately apologized for the meeting, but recent events had made them wary. Sanwoo also apologized for coming unannounced and asked if there was somewhere quiet to talk. The woman said she would prepare a place for them to live and take them there. As soon as we got inside, we saw a rather bad situation. Hunger caused by the fear of the desert seemed a little different here. It was strange because even for a desert, life here should be more stable. The woman brought them to a room and then brought them drinks and snacks to the table. This was all they could give them, so they apologized for such a modest service. Her name was Jung Inag, and she was looking after Exangul, and she can be addressed as Madam Jung. She was interested in the reason why they wanted to talk. Sunwoo got straight to the point, saying that he was looking for a man named Gevel. She is about 21 years old and athletic with dark skin, according to her reaction when asked if she was here. They are hunters, and there are eyes and ears everywhere in their organization connected to Nod. Besides, doesn't every meta person need to register in Node to be included in the protocol? Heng covered his mouth and said he thought that would be enough from her, and Sanwoo smiled and put it in his pocket. He took out a bag from there and slammed it on the table. It sounded like something hard. He opened it and told her that they had to understand why they were making such an offer, because they were aiming to recruit her, and that these cores would be a down payment. The fact that she didn't know what to say made it clear that she was in doubt, and everything went as planned. Pushing the colonels toward her, he asked if they wanted to make a deal with Nod, and there were many more colonels there. She turned her head to the side and said that she did not even mean that it was not enough. She replied that Gavul heads the only combat unit of hunters in Exegol, and if she is not there, the place will disappear. Sanwoo emphasized that she first needs to register with Noda and confirm her skills, and whether he will take her will be determined later. Madame Jung promised to talk to her when she returned, but she had one request for them. I bowed and asked them not to take her by force against her will, and they assured me that they had no intention of doing. Regardless of the outcome, it can keep these kernels and count them as payment for information. When she came out, Han exhaled because in this scene, he was the boss, and they were the two backup. In the end, it took the kernels, so it will not be an obstacle in the future. And since they showed their strength from the beginning, no one would interfere after Aaron said that and decided to pour himself a drink. Ehen was surprised by the alcohol and politely poured Sanhwa a drink first. Sanwoo stopped himself abruptly, convinced that it was indeed alcohol. It was even a luxury for the city. The question was how he ended up in the desert. When I realized, I immediately knocked the mug out of Hen's hands, shouting at him not to drink. The two of them looked at him frightened and did not realize that what had happened was not poison. Sanwoo looked at the glass with disgust and said that it was not poison, it was dog blood. There is an animal called a garg, an animal that looks like a dog, but has teeth like a beaver. Heng's mouth dropped open at this information and he felt very disgusted. The toxicity of his blood caused hallucinations similar to alcohol intoxication. The blood filters like alcohol, so it turned out to be a drink. It could not be drunk like alcohol, and if you consumed blood for a long time, the poison accumulated in the body until the dose became too high. The only question was how they managed to create something like this. When evening came, Sanwoo sat on his bed and thought that there was a reason why the atmosphere in the vault felt strange to him. The half-alive people we met along the way were most likely drinking dog blood. I wondered who introduced them to this drink of Madame Zhang's, some local who didn't know about the consequences or someone else. Suddenly, a sharp knock on the door diverted his attention, and he jumped out of bed. Opening the door, I saw an irritated girl in front of me and asked her if she was Gevel. But she started the conversation by saying that she had heard that he wanted to see her, but wanted him to go outside. Although Sanwoo was happy to see her, he felt that she would hit him if he did something wrong. After the memories returned, Gevel, who had been thinking about her constantly, was both happy and surprised to see her for some reason. She remembered clearly how she hunted a salamander without sparing any effort. He ran around looking for her because she disappeared from sight without saying anything. And when I saw it, I was surprised because it confirmed that she was incredible. She was dragging a rather large reptile behind her with one hand holding its tail. He was worried that she had disappeared without a trace, but he could only see that he had worried for nothing about the best melee fighter. And his feelings for her could also be related to the fact that she was his comrade who lived and died as a Noda soldier. Compared to her previous life, she seemed even cute, even though this one was wilder. But the smile on his face made her angry, and she shouted why he was smiling at her. I don't know if he's really from Noda, but if he loses, he should shut up and get out of here. Sanwoo shrugged and praised him for being full of energy, but it was not rude not to even listen to him. Javel shouted that this was not necessary, and abruptly exploded into an attack. And when she was in front of him, she added that she would defeat him anyway. Sanwoo wasn't going to fight her in close combat, so he gathered his energy in his hand. Then he snapped his fingers and launched the balloon against her shoulder, and she screamed in pain. The force surrounding her disappeared, and she fell backwards. Her people couldn't believe their eyes, and it wasn't just that he managed to win. Eren was equally surprised that he had decided not to play in front of him anymore. Asanu himself was glad to have learned the energy kick thanks to the leader Lee Den-sin. In the morning, in the place where they spent the night, Eren screamed because he realized that Sanwoo would not take her away against her will. When he said this in front of Madame Zhang, I thought he was just saying it for fun. But then why did he put on this whole show last night and win so easily? Sanwoo said all this to show his strength, and they were not here for long because he was going to hunt demonic beasts with. Eren did not understand why the hell he was acting so simply, as he could sooner or later bring trouble. Aen also expressed his opinion, because if they take it away, this place will fall to the onslaught of demonic beasts and murderers. But suddenly Eren stopped talking, turned around, and simply left the building. Sanwoo guessed that the boy was probably remembering the events that happened in McDonald's. Tai realized that if they didn't take her away right now, the shelter would collapse due to space. This place will soon be destroyed, and as soon as it is, they will take Gevel with them. If you look at it from the other side, it would be even more cruel than taking her away by force, but now I could only give her time. After a while, at the place of instruction, the guide explained that since everyone was there, he could start the instruction. They have to take care of the demonic beasts, which are insects that have become a real problem lately. The beast looks like a huge hornet that uses a poisonous sting to attack. If it stings a person, they die within 2 days. Demonic insect beasts are weak to fire, so they need to prepare strong armor and set them on fire. Sanwoo interjected and said that it was not true, but the fact that demonic insects are weak to fire is true. However, the so-called hornets that live in ruins are quite resistant to fire. They will fly even if their bodies are on fire. But that wasn't all. There was another important detail that was omitted. One hornet is equal in strength to the 17th rank, and ordinary people are forbidden to hunt such monsters because they will be destroyed in a second. He said that to be honest with him, their squad was nothing against the hornet colony, and if he called himself a guide, he had to back off and forget about hunting. Javol could not stand it and stood up and shouted that he was telling them to give them the territory for nothing. Sanwoo looked at her and said that there was a simpler option, where only he and she would go, 2 people with a common goal. But people began to resent it because they had been doing just fine on their own and didn't need Nod's help. Looking at them angrily, he asked them to evaluate the facts because they did not cope on their own, but always relied on Gevel, which is why they survived. She thought about it a bit and agreed with his words and let all the people go. I was also irritated and believed the specialist from Noda, because if he said it was dangerous, it meant it was. Javol walked to the front, gritting her teeth and angrily asking me to hurry up and follow her. She immediately warned me that if I thought it was an opportunity to take it instead of getting paid, I was very wrong. He reassured Sonva, because he knew perfectly well that she would not allow him to take it away, and that he did not have to worry about paying for it because he would only ask for information. On the way, he told me that hornets create colonies of up to 200 individuals, but they were even dangerous even for metahumans if they stung more than 3 times. We had to attack the wing attachment points because everything else was as strong as steel. She asked what would happen after they were destroyed, and Sanwoo said that she would call the others to make alcohol. They need alcohol from hornets, and for this they need enough water. When drowned, the poison that came out of the insects was almost the same as real alcohol, but over time the strength of the poison weakened. In a month, instead of this disgusting garg blood, they will be able to drink real alcohol. They just need to wait for it. Javol smiled, because if that's the way to go, it would be a great way to celebrate. When they arrived, they made sure they were in the right place. We quickly moved to the wall created by the hornets to get a better look. Sanvu noticed that now was the best opportunity to attack because there were only 2 hornets on guard. I planned to hit them with a powerful attack while the others were sleeping to reduce their numbers. I took out the sword, put it in front of me, exhaled, and began to accumulate energy in it, wanting to see how it would turn out after the experience of my past life. Svensik shouted, swinging his sword of moonlight, and the cut went clear from top to bottom. Jivel was very surprised by this skill, but Sanwu thought he could even destroy the whole hive. When the wall collapsed completely, a few hornets were killed, but most of the remaining ones were very angry about the destroyed house. And then there was such a noise that they covered their ears, and Gevel complained that her eardrums were about to burst. As everyone flew out, the noise became less, and Sanvu noticed that this was the beginning of the battle, and now it was every man for himself. The plan for destruction was simple: just destroy everyone who gets in the way, thus showing their skills. Still, it was alarming that one person was already rated at the 17th rank. But when I looked at her, I saw that she instinctively surrounded herself with energy as soon as the battle began. The golden core, and the energy that took the form of a lioness, fascinated me, no matter how many times I looked at it. It was as if Beatrice's barrier and his absorber skill, in addition to her skill, were unique and unclassifiable. By jumping up, she was able to easily reach the monster and grab hold of it. Quickly reacting, she was able to intercept the sting that was coming at her. Then she screamed with a rage and grabbed the hornet's wings and tore them off. As soon as I landed, I pushed off the ground again and chased after the next one. Having decided on the goal and approaching it, I gathered energy in my hand. With a punch with her other hand, she easily tore the hornet into 2 pieces. Sanwu estimated that with her current skills, she should be of the same rank as the late team leader, Zhang Changsu. And when she crushed a few more insects in the air, I thought that maybe she was even stronger than I thought. While she was doing them, he could do the others, but it seemed like something was wrong. He jumped up to a hornet hanging menacingly in the air, swung in front of it, and split it into 2. I also wanted to try different skills because, as I noticed yesterday, everything I could learn from the leader Li Jensen was better. And it all started when I remembered my past life. When I had dealt with one group of creatures, the rest were suddenly behind me. Without hesitation, the tentacled energy he summoned burst out of his back, and the tentacles began to hit them, piercing them through, causing them to fall to the ground en masse. But there was still one more problem with this skill. Just using it alone wastes 30% of his energy. It's good against a crowd of low-ranked beasts, but now it's a waste of energy to use it, although the skill has improved since I used it against Kang Hensu. But the lack of energy was annoying. To regain the glory he had in his past life, he needed to significantly increase his internal energy. It was not cool that because of this, we had to destroy the insects one by one and not all at once. Suddenly, he heard a strange sound behind him and turned his head to look at Givel. The hornet knocked her to the ground and drove its stinger into her leg. Sanwu rushed to her as soon as he admired her skills, and then she was in this state. She continued to fight the monster, but first she wanted to throw him off. Sanwu shouted at her not to do it, because otherwise these actions would tear her skin off. Raising her torso, she threw force into her hand and hit the lower part of the hornet, separating it from the stinger. He thought it was a good choice because if something had gone wrong, she would have lost her leg. Javol thanked him for the explanation, but she could feel the poison spreading through her body and her leg gradually paralyzed. Then I realized what was bothering him. Gevel was like a sophisticated wild animal in the past, but now she is not experienced yet. After taking a fighting stance, I asked her if she knew how to use her inner energy, and realized from her reaction that she did not. Since there was no time, I decided to explain briefly that her energy looks like a lion, and she uses it inside her body. After enlarging the wound with the knife, he must use energy to expel the poison while maintaining his skill in action. And while she is doing this, he will cover her, asking her not to be distracted. Javol shoved the knife into her leg, gritting her teeth in pain and pulling the sting out. Then she activated her power, and through the wound, you could see the poison coming out of it. She groaned even more and turned her head away to avoid looking at it. But Sanwu shouted at her that people don't die from such nonsense, so there was no need to whine. Looking at her, he thought that it was important to get good training regardless of talent, so he should take her to the headquarters. The difference between them is that he has gained experience from his past life, and his body remembers his training in Noda, while she has only instinct. Now she can't fight high-ranking demonic beasts because she can't even handle a hornet. Javol is still in the process of healing, will be a problem if she is attacked by a hornet. You need to attack them with tentacles at the same time. But the biggest problem was the queen, who hides in the darkness in the middle of the hive. If he uses the tentacles, he will have most of the energy left, and the question arose whether he will have enough strength to destroy them all. I immediately put the bad thoughts aside for later, because now I had to take control of the situation. The hornets immediately began to fall to the ground with no chance of escape. This situation was inevitable, but I spent too much energy. She had about 45% left, and yet this should have been enough against the queen. Sanwoo approached Gevil, tore his pants, and asked him to stop shouting at him. He praised her for doing a good job and cutting the affected area quite well for the first time. And now he asked an important question about the leg he wants to prosthetize, as he knows a wonderful magical engineer. He jokingly told her to concentrate on her treatment, and that he would go and deal with the queen. Gevil breathed out that now Exangle's people would be safe. Sanwoo entered the interior worried that he had little energy left because he could still meet the hornet soldier who would guard the queen. Even though I thought I had killed everyone, I had to make sure and direct the light into the tunnel. If there is someone there, they should come out into the light. As soon as the glowing ball flew in front, he realized that there was no one left, which meant that all the hornets had mobilized to defend the hive. And it was also a good sign because the breeding ground where the queen is located remained. When I ran to the spot, I saw a huge insect that was alone. To defend herself, she tried to make noise like her soldiers at the start of a battle. But resistance was pointless, because she had nothing else but a deafening ability. Then he came closer to her, swung his sword, and struck her. Having shouted at Svensik, the sword of the crescent moon intended to send her to the soldier. And the stoda began to swell, and lumps appeared on her body because of the excess energy in Sibai. This was going on until an explosion occurred and the energy was released from her body. When it exploded, eggs with small hornets came out of it. They had to be destroyed in order to completely end them, so I decided to release the energy and destroy them. Then he took out a knife and went to the place where the defeated queen lay. Digging through it, he recalled that when he was a guide, this sight excited him, but shouldn't the Hornet Queen have been rewarded better? Finally, I found a Hornet Queen crystal that was a real treasure. Although it could be used only once, it restored the entire energy supply. Since he destroyed everything, even the eggs, Exangle's people will now be safe. And in my mind, I immediately thought of Gevil, who also said the same word. It's a pity that it was only for a while, and it made me feel heavy at heart. But if you are wrong, this place will meet its end, just like in the last life, and you could not retreat because of the emotions inside. On the way, dragging Gevil along, she complained about appearing in front of people like this because it was like a blow to her pride. Sanwa understood because she felt that way because her skill did not match her talent, and he knew because he felt the same way. She apologized because what she was about to ask would sound embarrassing, but could they split the kernels 50-50? He said she could take everything and make alcohol because he had already told her what he really needed. Gevil asked what he needed to know from her, who lives in the middle of nowhere. How can she know what he does not know as a member of the Nod? But Sanwoo was curious about the real reason why she could not leave this place. They came to a house. Gevul said that it was her house. Sanwoo joked that if he had known, he would have come with flowers. She walked him into a very dark room. Then Gevil joked that if he brought flowers, they would overwhelm the smell. After she told him about the smell, he felt as if he could hear rotting bodies stinking. She grabbed him by the blanket and said that if he wanted to know the real reason, he had to look at the bed. Although it was not a secret, she asked me not to tell anyone about this person. The man looked like a monster, snarled and stank very badly. Gevul explained that it was her younger brother who was addicted to Garg blood, and for this reason could not leave this place. Sanwoo said that he was sorry that this happened to her brother, but that he could not give up his future because of this, because of his responsibility to his family. But she shouted that she didn't mean it, because she was the person who brought the alcohol here. At this confession, Sanwoo opened his mouth in embarrassment and looked at her. She went on to say that she heard it being done, and when she dragged him to the shelter, this happened. She needs to stay and redeem her sins until the very end. Looking at the documents, this is all the manager left about Gevul from his past life. The only survivor of an unknown hiding place in Bushin, she was found with many serious injuries inflicted by demonic beasts and was rescued by Nod. After an unexpected recovery, she joined the Noda military forces and searched through her memories to try to remember at least some more details, but was unsuccessful. Judging by its current state, it was restarted to the state of a beginner who could not really use its powers. At the moment, Sen, Alexi, and Minnie are under Nod's supervision, and Gevil needed a good workout. It was the only way to solve all the problems. To catch the tigers, you need to go into their lair. But suddenly he was interrupted by Hen and Aaron, who entered the room. They complained that it was snowing and the weather was crazy. It felt like winter outside. As he had asked, they checked all the roads in the area and also measured the strength of the locals. Sanwoo praised him and said that he would tell him all the details during a scheduled meeting. And now we had to listen to him seriously because this place will soon be a war zone. In 4 days, a horde of orcs is supposed to break in, and they are frozen with this information. People asked him what he was talking about and how he knew it. Sanwoo replied that he would like to refrain from answering how he learned about it because it is not important now. The orc horde that has passed through the northern zones 7 and 8 will soon be here, and there will be a third-ranked demon beast, stronger than any they have ever seen. If they can avoid it, they will be fine. The only question was whether the locals would survive the attack. Ahen was the first to express the opinion that even without the monster's attack, this place would die because of the blood of the Gargs, and Aaron added that after the hunters were taken out, there would be no hunters who could defend themselves. Then Sanvu said that when the orcs come here, people will cling to Gevel even more than before, and then it will be even harder for them to take her away. I am sure that she will not leave her people until the very end. Aaron asked what they should do in that case. Sanvu asked for silence and explained the plan. After there was silence and they sat down in front of him, he told them. Hen was the first to shout out that, judging by his words, they would avoid the battle and then save Gevel. This is exactly what I meant when I asked for more thoughts and questions. Aaron asked if it was possible to move the people to the second zone and asked Gevel to go with them instead. This was not possible because they were created outside of Nod, and even the desert could not accept them, except for the fact that they were still dependent on the blood of the Gargs. With their current strength, they cannot stand up to the Orc King. It made no sense to put themselves in danger, and this option is the least evil. Hen agreed, but still couldn't think that they would ignore someone else's destruction for their own purpose, as it was too much like Nod's style. Sanvu thought they were rubbing salt in the wound after the memories came back. A strong sense of duty to destroy demonic beasts arose inside him, and his way of thinking changed. He did not object, but in the plan to destroy the monsters, Gevel played the role of a powerful weapon, so he asked not to forget the reason why we came here. It wasn't about saving this place, it was about finding teammates, so he asked them to trust him, and Hen thought about it and agreed to the end. Asanwu realized that the reason they wanted to save people was because they didn't consider the mission of destroying monsters important. But in the future, in the worst case, it will be quite difficult to even save Gevel, who just hopes that this will not happen, and asked me to remember this just in case. Then Aaron raised his hand and asked me to wait as he had a question. He did not fully understand why he was not included in the plan and what he should do. Sanwu looked at him and asked if he minded if they went away and talked to him alone. They went outside, and he told Aaron everything quite honestly about the conversation in Noda and why he was not included in the plan. Of course, he felt sorry for the boy and put his hand on his shoulder before leaving. Aaron stood looking up at the sky, shocked by this conversation. When Sanvu went to bed, he kept thinking that he had told him that this was their last point and that he should return to the 17th zone. He also told me that Minnie and Sina were already at Noda's headquarters, and as soon as everything was over here, they would go there too, but without him. No matter how skillful he was still an ordinary person, and it would be a tragedy to lose him on the battlefield. He did not need to stay here and fight against the orc. Aaron went into the house. He didn't even have a face on him. He just walked silently to his bed. But Sanwu said that Jamie was restoring Zone 17, and if there was a guide like him, it would be easy for them to get back. When I saw that he was gone in the morning, I was glad because I thought he needed to live in safety. Suddenly, he jumped to his feet because he heard a noise outside. Meanwhile, Hunter Hen watched the desert through binoculars. When Hyun ran to him, Sunwoo jerked because he saw something there. I immediately handed him the binoculars, and he saw that a horde of orcs was approaching them from a distance. When he noticed the horde, the man in the outfit immediately rang the bell and shouted for everyone to hide. At this time, Gevel tied her brother up tightly so that he would not escape. There was no other way out, so I asked him to stay here and sit quietly until the orcs passed by. Her brother growled something quietly as if he was talking to her. Gevel said that they would not just go away, and that this would most likely be their last battle. Suddenly, she was drawn away from the street to come to the people quickly. When she came out, she saw a bad picture. Houses were burning, and people were running away. The first thing that interested her was what Madame Jung was doing there, and the guide explained immediately that she was doing her best to keep the defense of the southern wall, and asked about the people from Nodu. But the guide checked them out, and it was not clear because they said they were from Noda, but when they were really needed, they disappeared. Javal noted that they could even do it when one of them is not even a human being, and if Nod's military forces do not intervene, they have zero chances. They are also not in a position to make deals with Nod. They finished their business when they destroyed the Hornet, even feeling sorry for her because she was waiting for their alcohol party. She told the guide to help Madame Chan and to keep an eye on the eastern wall in the meantime. All this time, they were being watched by Hen, who was tasked with keeping an eye on her. When I reached the wall, I looked up because the next step was to jump to the top. As soon as she did, she saw a horrific picture of destruction. Before that, Sanwoo had told Han that it was not typical for demonic beasts to create organizational hordes. At that moment, Heng was wondering if Eren had managed to escape to the 17th zone unharmed. Sanwoo thought about it too, even though he had taught him everything he could in a very short time, thinking what if a miracle happened and he awakened too. But then I caught myself wondering what he was thinking about, because miracles in the desert are complete nonsense. He reassured Heng that he was confident that if he managed to get to Zone 17, he would be of great help to the exchange center. And now I had to start, so I gave him a jar and explained that it was a lethal pheromone from insect monster, and if you spray it, the smell will disappear for a while. For the rest of the time, Sanwoo stayed on the roof, watching all the events from afar. I could see that some people were running away from that place, and some were wandering around like drunken people. Monsters who were strong against people walked around and destroyed everyone. And when he turned his gaze to the side, he saw that one of the orcs had wounded Madame Chan. He had to force himself not to tear up, because he only had to think about saving the key. At that moment, Hunter Hen reported on the radio that Ms. Gavul had started a battle with a group of orcs. Thanks to her help, the eastern side was still somehow holding on, while all the other sides had already fallen. Even Hen was trying very hard to keep himself in check, because if not for the plan, he would have run to help. Gavul, surrounded by her power, ran to the breach, beating the repetition on her way. Her anger bubbled up from within, and the orc in her path was shattered into two. To attack the others, she jumped up to the wall where one of the creatures pointed its spear at her. But she quickly passed him, grabbed his head with one hand, and sank her teeth into his throat. Then she jumped to throw the body to his brothers below. Having landed next to Givul, she was not going to stop, intending to go all the way. The orcs surrounded her and watched as her body began to glow even more with energy. But suddenly she turned her head to the side and saw a huge axe coming at her. And with her hand in a block, she managed to block the dangerous blow. But it flew away from him into the defensive wall, creating a pile of dust. A huge monster that did not look like the rest of the orcs approached her and looked down on her. Hen immediately radioed that Ms. Gavul had met with the Orc King. When he heard this, he shouted into his radio that he was immediately going to them, ordered Hunter Hen to follow the agreed-upon Plan B immediately. Sanwoo himself activated his skills just to make it to the finish line. This was the worst scenario I could imagine, hoping that with the strengthening of my legs, I would make it. Meanwhile, Gevil, having recovered from the giant's attack, decided to attack as well. But the Orc King had other plans. He was not going to stand by and watch and attacked her as well. He managed to intercept her punch in the air by punching her. It was instantly thrown back, leaving a trail of dust behind. Sanwoo was running very fast, thinking only that she could hold on for a minute longer, not knowing that the Orc King was standing over her unconscious body. The monster's axe rose into the air, its blade glistening in the moonlight. Hen could not stand it any longer. Realizing that there was no other way out, he jumped up and stopped the blow. His task was to prevent Gevil from meeting this king if this monster was involved in the rescue. I also recall the words of Sanwoo when he asked how he would know when he met the king, a question that turned out to be absurd. I remembered the pheromone. It was supposed to be used when Gevil dies from fighting regular monsters so that you could take her away and hide to the agreed place, and his physical strengthening will allow him to escape from the orcish soldier. But if Gevil meets the king of monsters before that, she could die, and that would be the worst thing that could happen. And if he doesn't arrive on time, you need to intervene at the last minute until he does. It was only 1 minute because during this time I could have reached them using the strength of my legs. Everything happened in time for Sanwoo to get to them. Hen was able to hold out a little longer because the king managed to push him back, and being surrounded by monsters, I realized that I was in a bad situation. I also didn't want to lose because it would be bad if I didn't manage to save Gevil, but I came to my senses because I needed to save myself. He couldn't believe that the Orc King had only touched him, and he already felt that he could barely stand. He knew perfectly well that if this attack of the king's hit him, he would not live. Suddenly, the flow of light energy from Sanwoo's sword managed to throw the creature back a little. The king drew attention to another participant in the battle because he felt his strength. Sanwoo did not expect his action and decided to hit him on the head from the bottom up with his sword. Thus, he gave Hen a chance to save Gevil while he was fighting. He went into the hole in the wall with her on his back without asking any question. When the Orc King saw them running away, He roared with a voice that was not his own. Sanvu, again sending a stream of energy at him, emphasized that he was his opponent. Since the warm-up was over, I suggested that the monster start a real fight. The king liked it and turned and laughed at him. But something rather strange happened. The orc mage hit the ground with his staff, then picked it up and began to say something incomprehensible. Orcs were 5th-ranked mages, and there was only one in each group because of their rarity, and because of that, there was little information. And as his name implies, his power is connected to the spiritual, so it is highly likely that he uses telekinesis. But after the orc wizard raised his hand, orcs on wolves ran out from the side. Sanvu didn't realize that they even had orc hunters. It wasn't even in the record. They had to be detained on the spot until they were sure that the hunter Hyun had not run far enough. But the king figured out his plans and waved his axe, indicating the beginning of the battle. After the strike and attracting attention to itself, the monster's laughter echoed throughout the battlefield. Sanwu realized that he would not let him go, and in such a situation, he could only trust the hunter hen. After running a couple of dozen meters from the battlefield, he stopped to catch his breath. He was also worried that Givel was very quiet, so he thought that maybe he needed to give her first aid. I remembered Sanwu's words to stop only at the agreed point. Because of doubts, I decided to look back to see how far I had gone. And at that moment, he saw 2 orcs riding on wolves rushing toward him. He didn't expect this, and after holding Givel tightly to him, he turned in the other direction. He used his physical strength to run away as fast as he could. Although I knew that I was moving much faster than usual, I could hear that they were catching up with me. I began to realize that at the moment, I would not be able to beat the orcs out of the wolves, but I had to fight back. The orc who was running a little in front took out a spear and pulled his hand back to throw it. Suddenly, there was an explosion, and the orc was engulfed in flames and the spear flew out. In addition, the monster fell off the wolf and bounced to the side, only to be heard groaning in pain. His friend stopped and turned his head to the side to see what it was. Hen didn't stop running. He just turned around and wondered what it was. A voice from the house in front of him told them to keep running without looking back. Hen guessed that it was Aaron's voice sitting on the roof and shooting at the orc. After charging the second arrow, he shouted that he knew they would not go anywhere without him. Meanwhile, there was a pause between Sanvu and the orc king before the battle began. Sanvu appreciated that, as expected, the other orcs would not interfere in the battle while the king was fighting, so he could concentrate on the battle with the king. But the pressure coming from him was great, so I just had to remember that I was not fighting him to defeat his goal of drawing attention to myself. He waved his sword and shouted a sword of moonlight, and the energy flew at the monster. It crashed into the axe and spread on both sides of the king. Sunwoo ran after the energy to repel the next attack while he was repelling one. Since his arms were raised, he managed to move to the side and cut his leg. He did not expect that the king would be able to get him off his back. He raised it above him and roared at the top of his lungs to symbolize superiority. And then he sent his hand down and nailed Sanva to the ground with his weight on top. Without releasing the pressure, the king gathered the energy in his hand and directed it at him. However, Sanwu managed to mobilize himself and quickly jump aside. Being wounded, he estimated that the king had incredible strength. Seeing him approaching and looking at his wounded leg, I wondered if this creature could feel pain at all. Then I noticed that the orc mage had become more active and was shamanizing something in the orcish language. Sanwu thought it was not he who gave the command to attack and dared to interfere in the king's battle. But suddenly I heard a strange sound behind me, as if something big was in the air. Turning around, I saw that the incredible telekinesis of being able to lift such a large part of the house immediately activated the energy shield. But I noticed that this house flew by, which meant that it was not the target. The orc hunters were dodging arrows all the time and moving on to the target. Hunter Hen moved further and further away while Aaron detained the pursuers. Aaron tried not to stop shooting at them to give Hen an advantage. Suddenly, the orcs looked at each other as if they were planning to do something. One remained standing, while the other turned around and wanted to continue the pursuit. Aaron shouted before they started using their brain, but it was pointless. I decided to get rid of the one who would be the first to beat. After releasing the arrow, an explosion sounded right in front of where the first orc was. It stopped him, but did not destroy him, and he moved on in the hope that he might be able to escape the trap. Aaron loaded the next arrow and shouted that he was trying in vain. He was finished anyway. But I noticed that while he was doing it, his partner was watching him from the side. He shouted at him what he was looking at, or whether he wanted to shoot a hole in his head. The orc turned his head toward the horde, pointed an arrow at the building, and shouted something. Aaron was puzzled by what was happening and why he was shouting into the void, and also why she doesn't turn her head back to him and stare at the same place. Suddenly I saw a light above my head, looked up, and there was a house above me. The house fell on the place where Aaron was, destroying another building. He managed to survive, although his body was breaking with pain because he had received many injuries. My body was shaking with pain because when I looked at my leg, it was broken. Suddenly, he heard an orc approaching him, and his eyes filled with fear. The reason they are called orcs is because they look like the lowest-ranking creatures from popular disaster stories or computer game. But there was one thing. This name didn't suit them at all because they were really strong. Aaron thought about it and mentally asked them to look after Min. Meanwhile, Sanwoo continued to fight against the king, dodging powerful axe blows. It was terrible because the king used not only orc hunters, but also orc mages to prevent Gevil from escaping. In this case, I decided to make a second approach and raised my sword above me. Although it was the first time he used it in combat, because it was difficult for Li Jingxing to use this technique, and he hoped that Hen would dodge and fight back. After manipulating the sword, yellow energy that looked like a whip appeared from it. Sanwoo struck at the Orc King, but he remained standing. He just raised his hand and pointed at himself as if he wanted to say something. He smiled at him as he understood his hints that he had too much armor. But there was one thing. His attack was not aimed at the king. The sound of his backside made the orc turn and see that the mage had been sawn in half. I explained to him that this attack would be enough to cut the annoying servant in two. It was time for the third technique, which raised the sensations to the maximum in exchange for the power of an infinitesimal sword. The Orc King was not prepared for such a turn of events, and his surprise was evident. Sanwoo shouted that now that the irritating element was destroyed, they could continue their fight. Although he no longer had to worry about the interference of the Orc Mage, he had absorbed a lot of kernel. I also saw that the king was no longer interested in the battle, and was seriously determined to finish him off. From the very beginning, he only wanted to buy time, and having distracted him enough, it was time for him to disappear. You need to get out of sight without delay, and you can also use something else. This level of attack was nothing for him, but he wanted something completely different. He pointed the sharp end of the sword at the king and shouted an explosive sword. The explosion was strong enough that the Orc King could not be seen behind the fireball. Now I could take the chance while he was not looking and run away with my legs strengthened. As soon as he started to run away, a hand suddenly appeared moving toward him. The king channeled his strength into his hands and began to squeeze Sanwa, clasping his hands tightly. I felt as if my spine would soon give out, so I raised my sword over it and took aim. But he got the orc in the mouth and managed to catch the blow with his... He clenched his jaw tightly, and the sword shattered into several pieces. Sanwoo started to get nervous at the sight of the sword, and now he had to get out of it. Without hesitation, I decided to use the remaining part of the sword to strike him. And then I remembered that the sword in his mouth had to be spit out, because this artifact conducts the concentrated energy of the core through itself. And if the sword combines with its inner core energy, an explosion will occur. Sanwoo leaned back a little and shouted out an energy shield, which connected the cores. There was a powerful explosion from the waves of which the watching orcs had to take cover. While the dust was around and no one saw anything, Sanwoo used the legroom to escape. This battle was enough for him, as he wanted to escape from the very beginning at the right moment. The explosion was so powerful that a piece of the Orc King's horn was torn off and his jaw was hanging open. Orcs with bows shot arrows in the trail in a bid to stop him. Sanwoo turned his head and immediately used his energy shield. Most of the arrows were deflected, and only one managed to penetrate the defense, wounding him in the shoulder. This indicated that he did not have enough kernels. The barrier did not fully recover after the explosion, in which case he only needed to run. He shouted out acceleration and ran as fast as he could away from that place. It turned out quite well by moving the internal energy to the lower part of the body. Suddenly I saw that the traces split, thinking that the orcs were hunting, and decided to use pressure tactics. I also noticed that there were traces of cannonballs on the ground, and wondered when Hunter Hen had been using them and where he had gotten them. Then I stopped and was shocked to see that one wolf and an orc were defeated. I did not expect them to get so close to the place of their meeting, because it could have ended badly. Sanwoo quickly ran into the house, opened the door, and shouted to Hyun. He was startled by my sudden appearance, but was glad to see me. They made sure that each other was doing well and calmed down. Hen said that he had used all the healing items on Gevil and that she would still be asleep. Sanwoo apologized to him because he did not know that they would have orc hunt. They were able to inflict the wounds, and the healing substance was enough to heal the wounds quickly. Sanwoo noticed that he apparently managed to escape from the part of the house that was flying at him, but he did not understand. Seeing this reaction, he asked if that huge piece was not flying at him. Hin was busy running away at the time, but now he realized what the noise was. And then I remembered that Aaron was there. And because of all the stress, I had even forgotten about him. Aaron didn't return to the zone. He hid and shot at the orcs when they were chasing him only because of him and escaped. Sanwoo didn't want to believe that the split tracks he saw on the road led to the boy. He shouted to Hen to keep watching Gevel and that he would be back soon. When he was running, he called him a fool because he ordered him to run away from here to the 17th zone. As soon as I got to the trail, I stopped and asked for everything I could get, as long as Aaron was alive. When he got to the destroyed house, he carefully made his way through the ruins looking for him. I stopped to think about what I had heard about the theory that an orc mage is able to share vision with other orcs so that he could accurately aim at the house. He estimated that he had about 13% of his energy left, which was enough for one orc. I heard something stirring from the side and turned my head to look. A huge wolf came out of the shadows and growled angrily at him. Sanwoo took a position, took out a knife, and asked him where his master was, or if he needed to finish him off first. From the rubble of the house, someone shouted the command, "Stop!" and the beast stopped. The silhouette of Sanwoo could be seen behind the wolf, and he shouted to him if he was not Aaron. When he saw what it was, he shouted to wait for him, and he would quickly deal with the wolf. Suddenly, Aaron told the beast to sit down, and it sat down, and Sanwoo did not understand. The next command was to me. The animal obediently turned around and went to the guy. Sanwoo asked the boy worriedly if this was what he was thinking about. Aaron stroked the wolf and smiled, saying that it looked like he had awakened. He said that when he saw an orc approaching him, he immediately grabbed his gun. When he fired, he took a shot a little to the left, which the attacker managed to dodge. From this shot, I felt that his arm was also broken and did not move as he wanted. The monster came close enough and slowly got down from his wolf. The first thing I did was knock the gun out of his hands with a spear. He turned around and saw that he had fallen far enough that it would be difficult to reach him because of his broken leg. Since there was no other way out, he crawled after him, and the orc meanwhile raised his spear over him. But he decided not to kill him immediately, but struck him in the shoulder with a spear. He picked him up and turned him over, licked the blood that was left on him. He thought he had heard before that these monsters liked human flesh. I even thought that if I knew he would end up like this, I would have shot myself earlier. But I changed my mind. Even if I was destined to stay here, I would take him with me. Suddenly, something shone brightly in his chest. Then he screamed, as he did not understand where this pain in his chest came from, as his shoulder was punctured. A voice in his head brought him to his senses and asked him how he could help and if he wanted to live. I quickly realized that this voice did not belong to a person and someone was sending impulses to his head. When he looked at the orc, he felt that he could not wait to taste his heart. I was surprised that I could hear his thoughts, but the first voice did not belong to him. Turning his head to the wolf, he heard him tell him to speak quickly if he wanted to live. He said to get him out of his stupor that it was his voice in his head, but he didn't think there was time to talk now, so he quickly asked if he needed help. When the spear was already flying into his heart, he shouted for help and closed his eyes. And as soon as I opened it, I saw that the wolf had caught the orc's neck with its teeth and was not letting go. It was a chance to reach for a gun to neutralize the enemy. He took aim and shouted to the wolf that he would shoot him in the head so that he could run away. The beast jumped back, and the jet of energy from the core burned the monster's head in a second. The two of them looked at the orc and realized that it was over, that the danger was over. After listening to the end of the story, Sanwoo began to help him because the bone needed to be put back in place because it could have fused so much. He went behind his back and took out a bag with a healing substance and wagged it at his injured shoulder. To summarize, Aaron's ability was related to the taming of evil. Despite the fact that it belongs to the 6 main types, it has been encountered very little and only in some awakened ones. And with such an ability, he would have been useful even in the task of destroying beasts. He extended his hand and congratulated him on becoming a target person whose qualifications are sufficient to join Noda's headquarters. Although this is not good in all aspects, many people are expelled. Plus, they will be less protected from dangers, but still hope that they will go with him. Aaron smiled because it sounded easy compared to the time he spent in the desert. And since they can't do anything without it, I agreed to the offer. Sanwoo looked at him, and a strange thing flashed through his mind. Aaron saw his reaction and asked if something was wrong, but he didn't know what to say. What was surprising was that he no longer heard the voice in his head of absorbing ability, which meant that it might not work on everyone, or that the guy had such abilities, and I remembered this only once, and it was with another person. However, they had not yet met in this life, and he could not find anything in common with him and Aaron. Even in my previous life, I could not fully understand my absorptive capacity, so I still had a lot of work to do. Eventually, Gevel woke up and jumped up and screamed in fright, but she immediately calmed down and was in some room on a couch covered with a blanket. Wrapping herself in a blanket, she quickly ran outside to find out the situation. But in front of her eyes, Sanwoo and his team were laughing, and he was looking into the distance. Since she came out noisily, they turned their heads to her and saw that she had finally woken up. She wondered why they were here, if they hadn't returned to Nod, and she didn't realize where she was. Sanwoo calmly explained that they were now on the Noda transport ship, and he was heading to the main headquarters in Korea, so she was shocked. The ship sailed on the vast sea, and the places lit its way. Jevil and Sanwoo were drinking tea, and she asked if he knew this was going to happen. He replied that even if it was, what good would it do if they left Exingol and went away? His words rang true, and everyone would have stayed to fight to the end because it was all they had left. But Sanwoo emphasized that she was the one who brought the Garg's blood there. The place had been destroyed long ago. She looked at him and said it was quite rude, and it was true. Jevil asked what he wanted from her, since she no longer had anyone to pay for her sins. Sanwoo listened to her for a while and told her to blame him. She blamed him for saving only her and not the others, and that she should blame herself for her actions that led to the fall of Exangel. And to avoid seeing those damn demonic beasts, he is in the process of forming a squad that will wipe these monsters off the face of the earth. And he hopes that she will join him and use her anger as fuel to continue her life. Jevil agreed, and these words were even better than an attempt to reassure him that she would never forgive him if he ran away from these demonic beasts like her. And their conversation was interrupted by Aaron, who was on top of the ship and shouted that there was an island. The island to which they were sailing was called Jeju, the place where Noda's main headquarters was located. And since they are now entering the tiger's lair, he asks them to remain always on guard.